this meeting of the Arundel Planning Board to order. Today is November 8th, 2018, 7:01 p.m. in the ML Bay Elementary School Library. Let's start with a roll call.
Marty Kane.
Tom Jim.
Roger Moore.
Susan Roth.
Jamie Lally.
Rich Ganong.
Jens Berger.
We'll look for approval of the minutes for October 13th and October 25th. Oh, sorry, first we have approval of the agenda. On the agenda, we have approval of minutes for 2 dates. Citizens' comment, public hearing for Raptor Falls, pending applications, Paytech Corporation, Raptor Falls, Brookside Estates. We have a new application from Raymond Acres, and then we'll discuss land use revisions for home occupations and other business. Any motion?
Yeah.
Motion.
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. Any comments? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
It is unanimous. So, October 13th minutes.
I will abstain because I wasn't here.
I move to approve the minutes.
Motion has been made. Is there a
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
6 with 1 abstention. October 25th.
Move we approve. Written.
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve as accepted. Any discussion?
Yay. Back page, 6. Mr. Moran, motion to adjourn at 9:31. Mr. Moran seconded.
Sorry.
Everybody else.
Did you get that? Jens had seconded that?
Okay, sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
It is 6 and I have to abstain because I was not here. Okay. Citizen comment. This is the time when you as citizens, if you have anything that you would like to address to the planning board that is not on the agenda. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Hearing none, we will move on to the public hearing. Item number 1, Raptor Falls plenary site plan review, a proposal to construct an 18-hole miniature golf course with a dinosaur theme complete with range building and associated off-site parking on an 8-acre site, formerly Fritz's Tire, located at 1912 Portland Road, tax map 15, lot 12 in the DB1 district. Clifford, I'm really sorry, but I can't pronounce your last name. Chakowski and Reed Duffy King are the owner applicants. Does anybody from the public have any questions for the applicant? Joe?
Good afternoon.
Yes, please identify yourself.
Sure. My name is Joe Paolini from Cape Arundel Cottages. I'm one of the managing partners and developer. Nice to meet you, neighbor.
Nice to meet you.
It's my first time I've met you folks, but
Yes.
I've seen your plans, and basically some of the things I'm concerned about, I believe I submitted a letter to you folks.
Yes.
And some of those things is dealing with traffic, because as you know, the site that we have, eventually, we're going to have to probably improve 1,100 lineal feet of Route 1 with the 9.2 acre commercial site that we will be developing eventually. And that requires a deceleration lane, a stacking lane, and an acceleration lane going south. So that would basically, the acceleration lane and the stacking lane would happen because it'd be further down towards where our lot line starts, on our south. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm also concerned about the fact that I hear that there's no traffic impact study, which I believe there should be one, because how are those folks gonna get in and out? Our site, right now, when people come and go, there's very few people leaving and coming and going, but I believe your site, based on my experience in my lifetime, has traffic coming and going, maybe every hour, hour and a half or so. So our residents kind of tends to stay there. I think one of our residents here tonight. And we have a couple of letters that one of them supports your project and another one has some concerns as well. That if we're allowed to read, Kim White, who's my
This is a
director of
public hearing.
marketing
If you
sales, can
wanna-
read it.
If you wanna present it, by all means.
Rick Light is here also, who's my lead engineer, as you folks know. So that's one of my concerns. The other concern I have is the uplight on some of these things, especially at night, that could impact some of our neighbors. Not concerned about that as well, because we've taken a lot of precaution to keep all of the surrounding trees that we possibly can, to give protection to what at that time still is Mr. Fritz's property. The other thing I have a concern about is you show a septic system on the south side, which kind of tends to abut one of our cul-de-sacs, Adams Lane. And it doesn't show how many trees you're gonna be cutting in that area to get to it and around it to do your work and put your leaching fields in. So I'd like to see how that's gonna impact our owners and future owners. And with that, what I'd like to do though is also introduce Rick. We've got some additional technical questions if I could do so. But I do support business on Route 1. I do truly support it for everybody in this town because it is a good thing to have. So Rick, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, can I introduce Rick?
Thank you, Joe. Rick Light Environmental Design, again, agent for Joe Paolini and the Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve. And I think Joe said it well. I don't think there's any disregard for wanting to have this as an abutter. It's just, I think, going through the plans, looking at the ordinance, we just want to make sure that the board is aware of, and I'm sure you are. There are some items that we thought that ought to be addressed, just to make sure that it's done tastefully and respectfully. But overall, I don't think there's an objection to the project itself. It's just making sure the ordinance the plans are for the ordinance. Couple of the items, Joe talked about the traffic study, and I think in our letter, I don't need to get into the details, I think we pointed out that we believe that a traffic study should be done for the reasons Joe mentioned, and because it's pretty much, unless it's waived by the board, required by the site plan review ordinance. And second, Joe talked about, the septic system done by Albert Frick Associates. Not a big deal, but the plans don't show, as Joe mentioned, where limits of the grade. It's transferred the septic system from the HHE 200 to the site plans. We think the site plans ought to show the limits of grading and clearing, so the board and others can evaluate what that's going to look like. The other thing I thought would be helpful, we've looked at this. I think there's a pretty good buffer between the project and the closest edge of Adams Lane on the Cape Arundel project. But I think in terms of the context of, we understand there's going to be some of the features will be dinosaurs and that sort of thing, and one might be 26 feet high possibly, that if the board would request, or we would like to request, maybe a cross-section just looking from a sectional view from the mini golf course over to the Cape Arundel project boundary. It's sort of showing context, elevations of what it's going to look like. We do recognize there's a good depth of woods there, there's a good ledge knob. I think that's going to be a decent buffer, but just to make sure that things aren't visible. We did notice that the lighting study was well done, although the fixtures are 15 feet and below, and the lighting levels met the town standards as we believe. Parking was proposed to be gravel. I don't really care, but I just, the board, I think the ordinance requires those be paved unless waived by the board. And the clubhouse, which I think is great, they're moving Fritz's building right next to the road back a ways, which I think would be nice. Just making sure that the height of that doesn't exceed it's 18 feet, and under the nonconformance ordinance of within the ordinance, it's not allowed to exceed the current height. So just an evaluation, I think you're supposed to submit architectural plans or elevations with the site plan. So making sure that the board evaluates the nonconformity and that the height doesn't exceed the current height or is done tastefully or close enough to the existing height. Lastly, just not a huge concern, but just I assume that it looks like there's going to be some blasting and some of the ledge knobs, assumedly, and if there are, that the blasting study be submitted to the board and that there be enough of a radius to cover, which would be say 500 feet or more, to cover the properties next to the property line, as was done when this project went in. We were, and just to make sure that's being looked over by the board. So again,
There's
just-
no blasting.
Okay, no blasting, great. So those are just some technical questions to sort of back up what Joe was saying, not opposed to the project, but just to make sure some of the details are looked at closely by the board and in conformance with the ordinance. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I have Kim read those two letters? That way they're part of the, you know, support you folks, so that'd be good.
To whom it may concern, we are writing to you regarding the possible development of the Raptor Falls mini golf course. Our family are cottage owners at the Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve. At first, we were concerned about the development of land as a dinosaur-themed mini golf course. Clifford and Bree came to our clubhouse to present to us in detail their business plans. After their presentation, we felt comfortable with the ideas they proposed. We truly felt that Mr. Gokowski,
Tchaikovsky.
I'm sorry.
You can say Mr. G.
And Ms. W. King were very thoughtful in the choices they were making with the aesthetics of the course, with the natural looking dinosaurs, with volume and light control that will not disturb our surrounding community. With all the potential businesses that could be in this location, we feel the mini golf course will be an appropriate match within the surrounding community. Respectfully, Richard and Julia Robitaille, 6 Natanas Lane, Arundel, Maine. And the other one I have is, good evening. All we can say as owners of Cape Arundel Cottage Preserve, living here for 6 months of the year, we're opposed to the park abutting our property. We are concerned about noise, late night activity, and traffic. We feel it may impact our quality of life as well as our property values. Respectfully submitted, Tom and Danielle Mullen from 29 Adams Lane, Arundel, Maine.
Could we have copies?
Yes.
Is there anything that you would like to address concerning the issues that have been brought up?
Yeah, I mean, I can, I forwarded we had a sound test done, from, the person that Tad put me in touch with, so I have a copy of the sound test here, and he says we're well within compliance for the ordinance, it's not even close. And then attached to it, and I can hand these up to everybody if they want to. But on the back too is also the correspondence from the DOT, where he specifically states why exactly we don't need a traffic study, which is that, we have to, in order to qualify for a traffic study, we would need over 100 visits an hour in and out, and an 18-hole mini golf course does not fall within that jurisdiction or whatever. So he put some links in there to whatever the laws are, is how they read. But he was pretty detailed in saying that it's not required, they're waiving it.
Thank you. Did you have one that you could?
I don't, I think you, I'll.
Well, let me have this one and I'll get a copy from the town planner. Somebody else's. And we'll both get copies from you.
You have any more other questions? Or is that it? That was it, I had
That was it?
7. We gotta share.
I did look at that and I assumed you'd get something about the traffic study because they didn't tell you you had to do it. That being Route 1, they would have said if they wanted a study.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have the plans?
Yeah, so this is the updated plan, so I think really the only change is
I
just,
just, at this point, is there anybody else in the public that has questions? Yes?
If no one else has a question, I'd like to just respond to one item unless someone else has a comment. Again, Rick Lane again. I just wanted to be clear about the traffic, the DOT's requirement for a traffic study is based on, as you mentioned, 100 PCEs, which are passenger car equivalents, or 200, there's a threshold. That is that's an NDOT requirement based on being on a DOT highway. That has nothing to do, it's completely separated from the board's obligation under their ordinance to request a traffic study In other words, if you're on the side, if you're on Limerick Road or a small side road or Campground Road, the board has every right to request a traffic study if you feel there's gonna be traffic impact. So the connection between, I'm sorry to say, the connection between the DOT requirement, it's not arbitrary, it's a threshold. You trigger, you have to do the study and do a trip gen to demonstrate that you have or have not generated by a traffic engineer 100 peak hour trips, and it's peak hour, as you mentioned. That triggers a DOT traffic study, which is a comprehensive study. If you get up to 200 PCEs or cars per hour, it's even a more rigorous study, as have been done for other projects in town. That is completely separate. That only happens because you happen to be on a state highway or state roadway. The board's obligation under the land use ordinance, and I've cited the sections under 10.5, .2, .7, and other sections of the land use ordinance, obligate the board, if they feel that there's a need for a traffic study, independently to make their own decision if that's required. And it's sort of been policy, I believe, that that's typically required. If there's anything of any decent sized business where you've got a 60 or 52 or 60 car parking lot, one would expect that there'd be somewhat of a peak hour, but that's a decision the board will have to
I
make.
believe he has a 40-car
40
parking
car,
lot,
I'm sorry.
which would,
Okay.
you know, that's a third, or 2/3 of the number that you came up with. You said 10, 5, 2, oh, okay, there it is. Well, I went 10, 5, 2, 5, 3.
You can kind of do the math on it a little bit too. There's 18 holes. You can only have one person per hole or one group per hole. It takes on average 45 minutes to play a round of 18 holes. So at most, if there was a single car for every hole, it would be 24 cars at a time would facilitate max capacity per hour.
Was this requested to be waived? Do you know?
No, I don't think it was.
Okay.
I don't think it was requested to be waived. I think it was the board had determined because DOT had said, look, we don't want to study, we don't need a study. The board
Okay,
had basically said,
so we waived it for that reason.
you haven't waived it, you haven't made official waiver. Well, I
Okay.
would assume you have, actually, because you determined the
We
application.
determined it complete.
Right.
Okay. What do you think, Jeremy?
Well,
On what?
probably need to do that during the.
During our discussion,
Right,
right.
not
Okay.
Future,
Yeah, Marie.
when you had your meeting at the clubhouse, I wanna ask,
Wait until we close the public hearing.
okay.
Is there anybody, Mr. Light?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. The plan shows 52, I think 52 parking spaces, for the record.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thereabouts.
Anyone else that has questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name's Ted Sanamon. I own the property right across the street from you. And I think, Joe, you brought up some great points. I mean, the concerns on the lighting, the noise, the access and the egress. And I know that you're using a formula to be able to base a traffic study. But Joe, you're spot on, sadly, that is probably the worst visibility site on Route 1 in Arundel. I've lived in the property across the street for about 50 years, and there's been terrible accidents there over the years because of the dip that's in the road. The traffic now on weekends is on that Route 1 section, it's horrendous. And as a small business, I certainly don't want to have them to spend more money than they have to, but that is really a significant issue. The other question I just had is availabilily to look at the site plan. Tad, do you have that you keep that at your office or?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, once again, I think when I saw the dinosaur theme, I think you picked a perfect site for that. I think it has a lot of, I know that one kind of came out of the blue. But the thing that really was concerning me was the points that you brought up. I'm also concerned though, is people walking on Route 1 to go back, because it is gonna increase foot traffic and bicycle traffic, which is fine, but it's an aggressive piece of highway. So I just hope the board would consider that carefully when they do get to that juncture. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:21. And we will move into item 1. Cave Tech Corporation Contractor Yard Major Conditional Use, a proposal for the establishment of a contractor yard 2 operation for an existing paving contractor business located on an interior 5-acre parcel, tax map 37, lot 8A, served by the private way Stilton Lane with access off Sinnott Road in the R4 district. William Stilton is the owner, Pave Tech Corporation is the applicant, and Jason Fafiades, PE of Atlantic Resource Consultant, is the applicant's agent. I need to start off by telling you, and I'm assuming that Mr. Jones and Mr. Stilton are aware of the fact, this is not a public hearing. Nobody has a right to speak at this hearing unless somebody on the board asks them a question. Our questions will be directed at the applicant if we have any questions to go over. That being said, everybody needs to be aware of the fact that if the board says he is not entitled to a contractor yard 2 permit, that does not invalidate his contractor yard 1 permit. He is still allowed to operate in that location. He is asking to expand out to the contractor yard 2. We will not take away his contractor yard 1 permit. So, now, that being said, we've been asked to determine a couple of points. You all have the memo from the town attorney that says that the noise easement is irrelevant, and we should not be taking that into consideration. You also have a letter from Mr. Jones asking a question. He actually asked 2. And I think we need to answer those questions first. The table 511-1. The question was, if the planning board determines that table 511-1 does apply in the rural conservation, and that it will not consider the noise and buffering easements. So there's a 2-part question there. Our attorney has said that we should not consider the noise easements, but that is a question that we can address as to whether or not we should. The second part of that question, does table 511 apply in the rural conservation district? It does not say in the table whether it does or not, but if you look in the districts, the rural conservation district is R4, which is the residential district or a mixed-use district. And I believe we decided it was mixed use.
Rural conservation.
Rural conservation, but it's the, for the table's purposes, it was the mixed use. So that would apply. So the question I have for all of you is, does the noise easement apply, or should we be taking our attorney's advice and saying it's irrelevant? You cannot buy a noise easement is basically what she has said. What do you guys think?
It's the first time we've had that presented. I'm not sure, not knowing what else to go by. I would prefer to rely on legal advice.
Okay.
So I'd like to know, if you can't consider a noise easement, are there circumstances under which you can consider noise? In other words, she's discussing the joint ownership or single ownership of the easement, and that in some way that negates, nullifies, neutralizes, or whatever noise considerations. But in my mind, when I read this, it had to do with the consideration of the easement and how it was defined, and not necessarily that there aren't noise conditions. And so, am I making sense?
Yes. The purpose of the noise easement, though, is to alleviate the impact of having too much noise at the property line.
Right, but she's saying the easement is irrelevant.
She's saying you can't do that.
That's right, but you can still consider noise.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, okay,
you can always
that's,
consider noise.
all I'm saying is, it's a little confusing, because when you read it, you think, oh, there's no easement, you can't consider noise as a part of the easement or whatever, and then you think, oh, well, maybe noise isn't a part of the issue, but just because,
The way I understood it, you could say, at the property line, if the noise is, sixty in a mixed use, we can consider it at 60. You can't get a noise easement that allows you to make more noise than that.
right, and you're shaking your head, that basically what I've described is,
Yeah,
It's
Gilbert
essentially
Parkinson.
correct.
I'm standing in for Leah tonight, who's at another meeting, so I didn't write the letter, but I can certainly stand behind the letter. The concept is that you can't get the benefit of the new noise ordinance in terms of a new place to measure the noise. You have to measure the noise at the property line.
right, okay, I just wanted to be clear.
What do you think, Roger? Any comments, questions?
Yeah, we gotta go with what Leah said.
Jen?
I agree with these two, I don't wanna
Okay.
go against our friend.
Jens?
Well, my feeling is the whole purpose of the standard is to protect. And, in the absence of the need to protect, then it doesn't seem to me that it would have any utility. I think that there is a place for, noise easements here. But I also haven't researched it the way my colleague did, and so I think I would concur with my fellow board member that probably adhering to the guidance of our town council would be the thing to do.
Should we codify that in the vote?
Couldn't hurt.
Okay. Need a motion that we accept the town attorney's recommendation regarding the noise easement.
Make a motion, we accept the town attorney's recommendation on the noise easement.
Second. A motion has been made and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
Yes. So, can you explain exactly what the letter that Leah wrote in response means?
Sure, I'll do my
Okay,
best to
please,
keep
so
it
we
as concise as I
understand
can.
how the easement plays out
Sure.
and noise and so on and so forth.
Basically, you have regulations in town that say a maximum amount of noise can exist at the property line. In an effort to, say, avoid that applying to this application, the applicant apparently has secured easements, a noise easement, which frankly is something you don't see every day. I know that there's some precedent for them in terms of wind power, but I think if you go up to the York County Registry of Deeds, you're not gonna see a bunch of noise easements. So it's an unfamiliar concept for most people that are, practicing in real estate, I think, in this area. So the idea is that they've obtained a grant or commission, in essence, from those property owners to exceed the value of the level of noise on their property, effectively extending the area that they can make noise as opposed to the actual property line. One of the ways we looked at this was that it sort of like, well, where does this end? Does that mean you can, in other situations, acquire a pollution easement? An easement to have smoke or runoff or polluted runoff just because your neighbor consents to it in the form of an easement. We don't see that a noise easement is an appropriate way to end run the requirements of the town set forth in the ordinance. There's problems with the ordinance in terms of being too strict, then of course there's a remedy for that, which is changing it at town meeting, and that happens all the time. But we basically have to take the ordinance as it's written, and we don't see the noise easement as a appropriate way around that. It's, you know, certainly a credible argument though, and I think it was presented in good faith, and, you know, it was an argument that had to be looked at very seriously, and I gotta say, there's not a lot of law on it. We found some Superior Court cases, but, you know, there's not books written on this particular issue.
So, is there a takeaway that we can make from the fact that that there isn't a lot of precedent for using an easement for noise? That was a way to satisfy any questions about the excesses of noise, because there was an issue with noise at the property line? I mean,
Yeah, that would be the takeaway, that there was an issue of noise at the property line, and a way of satisfying that issue would be to, in
get the
essence,
easement.
extend and get an added buffer that, to allow that noise to exist in a place that doesn't go up to what they would consider to be like the new property line.
Right, so it was very creative, actually.
It was creative, and, you know, perhaps that's what courts are for, but,
Well, and lawyers too.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, okay, thank you very much,
Thank
that
you.
helped me a lot.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Marty?
I have a question. Does that determine which property line?
no, that we think the ordinance means the property line is the property line as the deed, not the easement line. Am I making myself clear?
No.
Or did I answer your question?
No.
Help me ask your question again, please.
Okay. What you're saying at property line, okay, but turn around, which property line?
The easement line or the deed line, is that what you mean?
It would be any property line, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah,
That's where
The property line
I'm
in the
going.
deed,
the property line and the deed,
in the deed, not
that's
in
what
the
your ordinance said,
easement.
and most noise ordinances talk about what the level of noise is at the property line. Usually you can make as much noise as you want on your property, but when you're making noise at the property line so that neighbors can hear it, that's why towns have ordinances to regulate that. In essence, this was a way of extending that property line, so that they'd have even more room to
Mitigate the noise.
make noise.
To me, is what's troubling about it, notwithstanding my prior remarks, is that focus on the property line, I think seems to me misplaced. The whole point is to protect the property over which the excessive noise would emanate. That's the whole point, right there, that objective. But for that objective, there would be no need for that provision within the ordinance. And the easement, I think, essentially has the property owner that gives it waiving that need for protection. It's not intended to protect the property beyond that necessarily, that's not subjected to the excessive noise.
Well, that's where we have the issue, is that, you know, to what extent can that sort of easements be used in other situations then too? My neighbor doesn't have a problem if I run some dirty water, my neighbor doesn't have a problem if I allow some polluted air, my neighbor doesn't have a problem with this, or that particular provision of the ordinance, and then gives the developer an easement for that. Is that the kind of planning, is that what the land use laws are supposed to be about? If your neighbor gives you the consent, then you're good to go. In essence, that's what's happening here, is they're giving the consent through the easement. Mr. Jones would, I can't speak for him, but he'd probably say, that's not consent, I'm giving a property right. And it's, in essence, part of the bundle of sticks of full ownership. But the other way of looking at it, this sets a precedent that could be used in this situation and in other situations in a way that enables people to get around the town's duly enacted ordinances. That could be another way of addressing this, if the board feels that easements are appropriate, you could say in the definition of property, or definition of lot, as measured from the property line, meaning the deeded line, or an easement. And if that was the feeling of the town, then that is an easy amendment.
But when you give an easement, you don't give away the ownership
That's
rights
correct.
to the property.
No,
So the person who owns the lands that's defined by the deed doesn't own the land that's part of the easement. That's just been granted as an accommodation. And so they are not the legal owners, and consequently, I think probably what Leigh was thinking, they don't get to expand their property lines based upon the easement because they don't own it and it's not part of their deed. And I think
That's
that makes
exactly right.
perfect sense.
That's
Okay,
that's
so,
what I'm saying.
so the answer is yes, I vote to
Okay.
accept Leah's letter.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to accept Leah's recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed?
Yeah,
6-1, correct? Okay, now, the next issue. I think we need to codify whether or not this is, have we ever ruled on this being a mixed-use district?
I think we have, we accepted the noise, study that was done back in.
Which references it as a mixed-use?
References to
Okay.
this group. Well, it doesn't mean to accept it, we accepted the information as being appropriate.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask the applicant and his attorney, based on the letter that you gave us dated November 6th, in the event the planning board determines that the noise standards in table 511-1 for either mixed-use or residence districts apply to the property, and the easements will not be considered in assessing the application, the applicant requests the planning board grant a second 30-day extension to allow the applicant an opportunity to evaluate the reconfiguration of the parking area and potential buffering measures in order to demonstrate that the applicable performance standards can be met. Is that your desire?
I would like a specific vote from the board, if you haven't done it, to say that table 5.11-1 does apply to this property. I think you implied that, but a vote. And then secondly, a specific vote that this is the mixed-use district pursuant to table 5.11-1 and not a residential district. And if you do vote both of those, then we would like an opportunity to reconfigure and perhaps consider some buffering, some artificial buffering that will enable us to meet those noise standards on the boundaries where the easements were granted. But if we come back 30 days from now and the board says, no, we're in a residential district, we're gonna start all over again.
Okay,
So-
that's understandable.
I feel like I've played my hand without knowing what the rules are.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Jones's requests are reasonable. I think it would be helpful to have the board discuss those particular points and take a vote. And I think in its minutes or its decision should include some reasoning behind wherever you come out. You know, the case law is clear, you need to back up your decision with your analysis. And I think it would do two things. It would make the record clean, but also, as a practical point, it gives the applicant some guidance where to go. And, you know, when I'm sitting in those shoes, I just often wanna know is, what do we have to do to solve this problem-solving mode?
Okay, so, we need a motion. First off, let's address whether or not this is a mixed-use district or a residential district.
And what's the criteria exactly that we're considering to discriminate between one area and the other, or to? And how is this decision going to impact other things that are going to come before us when we make it without study?
Well, we have,
Is there a description of R3 like there is for the BI, DB1, DB2? There is a paragraph of description of that zone.
It wasn't this one, I don't think.
I don't believe there is one on the mixed use.
I hope the board's members remember that we did have distinctions between various districts. We had three categories. One was business district, one was residential district, and the third one was, at the time, only two districts in there, but they were the mixed-use districts. And the board, in order to pass the ordinance, modifications in the new format, had decided that particular, in order to pass that with the town meeting, we combined all of the districts into one category. And therefore, the distinction that we had originally in here was evaporated in order to pass the ordinance.
What would the one category be?
I was just gonna
It's
ask
called
that.
land use districts. So we went from business district, residential, mixed use, we went to land use districts. So they're all jumbled together.
I believe the comp plan refers to this area as a
Yes, it does.
mixed-use district.
Correct.
It continues.
Does anything have the fire plan, Andy?
Although these questions probably should have been considered before we got to this point. And, you know, if you played your hand, I think, too early and showed your cards, I think that's unfortunate, but I don't think it's our responsibility necessarily to, you know, being the representative, it's your responsibility to make sure that you understand what all the parameters are of the zoning and, you know, the rights that Mr. Stilpen has in regards to his land and the other property owners. And so, I hate to be a hard nose about it, maybe it's just too many lawyers in my family, but to me, that's a specious argument, so.
Okay, may I respond?
Absolutely. Whatever, yeah, of course.
I was completely surprised by the town attorney's decision that you should disregard the noise easement. There's no authority for that. I've, in good faith, presented it. I respect the town attorney and your decision, but I did not foresee that, and there's nothing that I could have read in your ordinance that tells me that that's inappropriate. We proceeded on the assumption that table 5.11-1 applies, and that this is a mixed-use district. The original application said a mixed-use district. The opponents have raised the issue that this should be treated as a residential district for purposes of the noise limits. I think we've proceeded in good faith. It is my belief that this should be treated as a mixed-use district. Mrs. Howe thinks that it should be treated as a residential district, and she just submitted a letter to you. We need to know. It's not my fault that your ordinance is unclear as to whether a rural conservation district is a mixed use or a residential district under table 5.11-1 of your ordinance, when in fact your comprehensive plan says that there are four types of districts, and the table only has 3 of them.
So my suggestion would be that you get an extension for 30 days if the board is willing to grant it to you. You do your due diligence, and we'll do ours, and we'll meet again, and you'll know, we can discuss it and whatever, so everybody's on the same page. But I'm not prepared to make a decision without understanding completely what we're deciding and granting in terms of, you know, the use of the property and what's the zone and how it's considered.
And I understand that, but I think given the fact that this was submitted as a mixed-use district, and it has been considered mixed use all along, that we should rule that this is a mixed-use district, because that's the way the application has come through.
And Tad, is it a mixed-use district?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like a motion to codify the fact that this board considers this district to be a mixed-use district.
Make a motion to make it a mixed-use district,
Motion has been made.
clarified as we have.
Right, not make it,
No,
but just
clarify.
clarify it. Okay.
That's our interpretation.
And if I may add something to this in order to provide.
Let me get a second.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You've got it.
I've got a second, thank you.
If I may add something to this, while I provide justification for that, statement. The fact is that throughout the entire comp plan process, in which I've been involved in the last 3 revisions, the intent of the board, of the comprehensive plan committee, has always been to make the rural conservation district, a paragon of mixed uses that is traditional rural character, traditional rural economy, meaning that you essentially provide opportunities for natural resource industries, contracting industries, various kinds of agriculture and animal husbandry, timber harvesting and timber processing. These kinds of activities would be allowed to exist in this district alongside residential development as well. And that's been the intent. The planning board has, and you can see that reflected in the historic uses, list of uses, of conditional uses and permitted uses that currently are in a resource conservation district or the R4 district. You see, there's some pretty heavy industries, gravel pits and log yards and agriculture. It's animal husbandry. It's the only district in town that has animal husbandry unlimited. You can have an unlimited amount of livestock. So it's meant to reflect the historic and rural character, and continue that in a way that doesn't denigrate the town. The planning board will be facing the issue to implement many of the additional new uses that the comp plan committee had proposed and that the townspeople had codified at town meeting. And so that's something we're gonna be facing and dealing with some other non-residential uses that we're gonna see us incorporate into the rural district, into the R4 district. So when I say that that's a mixed-use district, that has always been the intent, and it has historically been the intent of the district. And it continues to be that intent, and the comprehensive plan committee has again affirmed that several times over the last several years.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of codifying the fact that this is a mixed-use district, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? You're opposed? 2 opposed, okay. 5-2. The next part of this is table 5-1, 511-1. Are we relying on 511-1 for the noise standard?
Based on the mixed-use district, I think that's what we have to go by.
So I have a question about that. I agree that may be the case, but I look at the very first line in the description on page 50. 511-1, maximum noise levels, the maximum permissible sound pressure level of any continuous, regular, or frequent source of sound produced by any activity shall be limited by the time period and use district listed in table 511-1. For the mixed-use district, that is 60 dB between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. And from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., it is 55 dB. And 511-3 specifies that the levels may be exceeded by 10 dB for a single 15-minute period per day. So as a mixed use, this could go up to 70 dB.
And it also doesn't say, well, I'm assuming that that 15-minute period has to be within the time frame of when it's acceptable to make noise.
Well, it could
Because
be,
it's not specific.
no,
Just added.
this is from 7 to 10, it could go up to 70. From 10 to 7, it could go up to 65. But you don't do it
Yeah, but
once
here
a
it
day.
says for a single 15-minute
That's
period
correct.
per day.
So if you do it during the 7 to 10 AM, you cannot do it between the 10 PM and the 7 AM. It's once a day.
But so if you don't do it during the day, can you do it between the 10 PM and 7 AM? Because that is not specific.
That is what that is rather specific. It says that it can be exceeded for 10
Once per
dB.
day.
Once a day. for
Right, but
15
it doesn't
minutes.
specify the time.
No.
Right,
No,
So
it does not.
it could be either time.
Either time.
okay.
If we wanted to, we could look at changing that to making it during business hours, or do anything else, but for our purposes right now, it's one 15-minute period of time per day.
Question to the chair. She
Yes,
asked
ma'am.
you. On that question, let's say for an example, you start at 6:45,
Okay,
15 minutes.
yep,
You overlap, time wise.
Okay.
Where is your noise?
6:45 would be 55 decibels.
6:45, it would be 55 dB, and your 15 minutes would expire at 7 AM.
That's why I'm
So you
going
could
at.
not make any more
Could
noise.
be up to
That's-
70 and then down to 60.
Have to
It-
be
it
down to
would-
60.
It would be at 65, you could never get to 70.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yes.
On the
That's-
clock,
That's a good
which
point.
which way are you going? I mean, if it's after 7 o'clock, okay, then you can have your 10 higher.
Yep,
If you turn around before 7 o'clock, even 1 minute before, you don't get it, you have to stay on the low end.
correct. That's my interpretation of the ordinance.
That's why I'm asking the question.
I think it's a good question.
That's a really good question.
It
That was part of the trouble that I was having. I think I need greater minds than I have to help me determine what that first sentence says. It says, the maximum permissible sound pressure level of any continuous, regular, or frequent source of sound. What does that mean? What does a continuous source of sound mean, or a regular or frequent? How
Well,
would you
you're in
define
essence
that?
the fact finder and the decider, so it's the zoning board of appeal in the
Okay.
courts of what these ordinance provisions mean. If possible, you look at the definitions contained in the ordinance. I haven't checked whether those words are defined in the ordinance. If they're not, you use the ordinary dictionary meaning of those words, and that starts with Webster's and goes down from there, and you can often get in a battle of it. But basically what the court is telling you to use is your best judgment and common sense as best you can, and expressing that as thoroughly as you can, and not just say I have a hunch or a feeling. Try to put some analysis behind it, and you should be all set.
Well, that's why I was asking, because when I look at this, I do not see this as being continuous. I do, however, seeing it as being regular, and the fact that it occurs on almost a daily basis would make it frequent. So I do think that the ordinance itself will apply.
But it doesn't preclude the fact that it could be continuous, regular, and frequent.
That's true, that's true.
So
It does not.
maybe
I was
we're
just,
using the wrong conjunctions when we're putting the list together. Maybe we need to refine this, and this has
Fortunately,
nothing
there's
to
no
do with.
commas or semicolons.
Yes,
to
so-
deal with it.
I'm not a wordsmith.
but when I look at it, it is not continuous. And even in this case, it's obvious that it is not continuous.
Right.
But it is regular, and it is frequent.
It's like
It's a
everybody getting
daily
up.
event.
It's like everybody getting up. It is regular,
Right.
we do get up.
For that reason, I think that 511(1) applies in this situation.
I agree.
I agree.
I think we need a wordsmith, which has
Good.
nothing to do with you guys, but we need to nail down,
Would you be surprised to find out that a wordsmith did that?
no,
You could ask the code enforcement officer what they think.
Well, we're here not,
Well, he's the one that will end up having to enforce it, so it
There
will
is
end up.
case law that suggests that the code enforcement officer is the final arbiter for the zoning board.
So I need a motion to indicate that we are going to be using 511.1, 511, the noise ordinance, as a basis for measuring the sound in the mixed-use district.
I'll make that motion, that table 511 does apply.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? All right, all those opposed? 6-1. That being said, the applicant is requesting a second 30-day extension, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. The only problem we're going to have is that the 30-day period expires on December 6th. We have a meeting on the 29th or on the 13th. The 29th? Okay.
Weather permitting.
Yeah, it'll be permitted. We'll put you on the agenda for the 29th.
Need a motion? We grant that extension?
No, we don't need one, do we? We do need a okay, I need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion, we grant the extension of 30 days as requested by the applicant.
Second that.
Well, correction,
Yes,
give more than 30 days because we're pushing it to the 29th.
the 29th is less than 30 days from now.
Is
It's
it?
21 days.
29th of November.
Oh, November, I thought you said 29th of December.
No.
That's where I was going at.
Okay,
So do we need a motion that they've accepted the
We gotta-
fact that they're gonna go early as opposed?
No, it has to be within 30 days.
No, unless,
We need to grant that,
we
right?
need to grant them, but I asked them and they said the 29th would work.
Right.
Right, so they're accepting a shorter period of
Yes.
time to come to.
Mr. Chairman, just point of order. What is the extension for, please? Bruce Reed on behalf of Lynn and Mark Howe.
That
What is
they
the
are going to
extension?
address the noise ordinance issue, and the fact that our attorney says that a noise easement cannot be granted, so they're going to look at fixing the noise issue in some fashion.
Okay, I just wanted, does that mean that the public hearing will be reopened and we'll have an opportunity to comment?
No, sir, it does not.
Well, if they're coming up with new evidence, Mr. Chairman, if they're coming up with a new solution to a problem that's been going on for an awfully long time, we would like the opportunity to be able to respond to it. I don't know what may happen, but I've heard through direct conversations with David that there may be a barrier, he said this tonight, there may be some other technology involved. We'd like to have the opportunity to observe it, to comment on it. I think it's only fair that the public hearing be open on that limited issue. Whatever issue, whatever new information and evidence is gonna come in from this applicant, we'd like the opportunity to respond.
I agree as well.
Okay.
I mean,
We can't do that.
But
can't do that.
I think you can allow public comment, you don't have to necessarily reopen the
So
public hearing. You
we
can
will allow
that as
public
part of
comment
the
at that point, but we will not be holding a formal public hearing.
And
Well,
the
we will
difference
allow you to
between
make
those
comments.
two,
I'm sorry.
the
I
difference
can't
between
advertise
those
it in
two.
time, I can't make it a legal issue, I can't legally make a public hearing within that time.
Okay, well, I just want, when you say public comment as opposed to a public hearing,
They will present what they find, and you will be able to comment on it and ask them questions. Understand at that date, on the 29th,
Yeah.
we have to make a ruling. And if we cannot make a ruling, they will get they will get a permit by default.
well, your town council's here, I disagree with that. That is flatly wrong. You cannot be forced as a board to make a decision just based on time, where the applicant's asking for more time, and the general public wants an opportunity. I don't wanna have to come back here in 30 days, and that night, say, whoa, that's an interesting piece of technology I've never heard of. I probably got Rick Light I'd like to hire to come and present some opposing testimony. I mean, honestly, this is, and, you know,
It
Derwin's
is my
here.
understanding, the ordinance allows for 2 30-day extensions. After that, there's
I
nothing
think
else.
that we could have the parties stipulate that the board will either make its decision that night or at a future hearing. If, for example, the public testimony, the public input goes on for a long time and the board needs some chance to digest it, it shouldn't be forced to make a decision that night. And I'd have to think the applicant would agree to that.
But-
I'm wondering.
But the only problem is, time the time has elapsed, and turn around and the applicant would be
But he
void.
has to have, I mean, the opposing side has
I'm
to have
just-
a chance to respond.
We're just
In
asking
kind.
for a fair shot here, just to
I'm
sort of
just
rebut.
responding to, we're playing time now. I mean,
Well, coming with the extension also should come with it the opportunity for the board to deliberate fully and make its decision.
it doesn't say that.
Well, I think it's implied.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. I don't wanna put Durwood on the spot here, but this is a matter of public fairness. You're holding a public hearing, this has been going on for an awfully long time, and now, at the very last minute, a very important issue is coming up, they're gonna try to solve the noise issue. I don't wanna have to come here with my clients in 30 days.
They are attempting to solve the noise issue where they had an easement that they were able to replace. It does not affect your clients.
Well, we don't know what they're gonna come up with.
It doesn't matter. On your client's property, they are not violating the noise ordinance. They are violating the noise ordinance on another piece of property, and that's what this is supposed to address. They have an easement from a neighbor who has no problem, and that neighbor has said, I will grant you a noise easement. Your clients, the noise at the property line for your clients meets the standards of 511.
But Rich, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, and I've got a little issue there, because, you know, they could propose something, I don't know, the neighbor, I have no idea, they may be hearing impaired and don't care about noise limits.
Okay.
They may take issue with the proposal to attenuate the noise, whatever it may be.
Okay.
And, you know, why should we preclude their ability to come out and, you know, give comment if they see fit?
I understand that, and I agree with that. I'm simply addressing the fact for these defendants.
No, I get it, I mean, from
But he
their
doesn't know,
standpoint.
but in all
Defendants.
fairness, he doesn't really know what the opposing counsel is gonna come up with, and whether or not it's really gonna impact his clients or not. And what we've done is we've shut the door to him being able to respond. And the fact that within the 30-day extension or 21-day extension, Mr. Stilfon's counsel can come up with another plan, I think in all fairness, we have to, I mean, even
Okay.
our counsel is suggesting that there's a way to have a response without, you know,
I
opening
think
up a
that you
big
should
can of
take the
worms.
public comment to the extent that there needs to be any on the revised plan at the next meeting. That if you approve the plan, then you don't have to ask for any extensions. If you're inclined to approve it on the spot, then you go ahead and approve it. If they won't grant if you need some more time to think about it, then you should ask them for that additional time. If they don't agree to the additional time, then you should deny the application.
Is it fair?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, Craig Rancourt for the Giles, butters. I'm a little bit amazed because you're allowing him to go back and present new evidence, and yet you're not allowing us to present evidence to rebut it if we deem it necessary. I find that appalling.
I have already told Mr. Reed that you will have an opportunity for public comment.
What is the difference
that not-
between him presenting evidence and us commenting? Is that gonna be considered evidence?
You are allowed to comment on the information that he provides.
I understand, but he's gonna submit it that night. I guess the point is, why not have just give us a time frame. Have him, the deadline to submit his new plan, whatever it is, not the night of the public hearing, because I'm afraid we're gonna get here, it's gonna be news to us and to you, and we're not gonna know how to respond. I really mean it. I mean, we might want an expert to come in, I don't know what he's gonna propose. So maybe a deadline for submission by the applicants, we have time before we come in to know what we're up against, and then we can have a fair fight.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, sir.
They're asking you to rewrite the ordinance, which we have followed. The ordinance allows the applicant to request up to 2 30-day extensions to amend the application after the public hearing. I have no objection to to letting them have a copy of the submittal as soon as we submit it. I'm not agreeable to a deadline that says we've gotta get it 2 weeks before November 29th or some other thing. The ordinance says what the process should be. If they think the ordinance is unfair, well, so do I. But I have to live with it, I live too.
Well, why can't we ask them, Rich, to submit by the 29th, and you'll have until the 13th to study it, and we'll make a decision on the 13th.
We can't because it's after the third.
Oh, it's after the
That's where,
30 days.
that's where it was.
That's the issue.
Right,
It is
right.
just
trying to-
Will the applicant agree to waive the 30-day limitation in this case, so that we can have time to
I don't
respond?
know if the applicant can. It's codified in the ordinance that you get 2 30-day extensions.
The 10.6.2.
I think our hands are tied by
For
that.
our own benefit?
An extension granted upon request of the
I
applicant.
think that the board and the applicant can agree to a further extension, and I think that the court gives deference to the procedural decisions of the board when it can. And I do recommend that there be some submittal deadline, so you don't have to review new evidence 15 minutes before the meeting, some sort of deadline, even though the ordinance doesn't say that. I think you can impose that a week before, 10 days before, 48 hours before, whatever you think is appropriate. So you're not left scrambling to understand what the new information is, and the neighbors aren't either.
Okay.
So we went to the,
Let me ask a question though. Since it's codified that we only can give 2 30 days, if this was appealed to the court, would they not find that as a procedural error on the part of the planning board?
It's possible, but I'm trying to work this out on a consent basis.
But if he submits his paperwork on the 29th, and we give him until our next meeting, so you submit it on the 29th, and it's sealed, and you have a chance to review it, and we will make a decision. You'll have a chance to rebut or comment on what he said, and we'll have a chance to review it and make a decision on the 13th.
We don't have, that's beyond 30
But
days.
that's
The
beyond.
what
problem
I'm
is the
saying
ordinance
is
says it's a deemed,
he's gonna submit
acceptance.
30-day
his-
extension.
He'll be
Otherwise, it's
within the
deemed, other
extension.
ordinances say
But
it's
it's
deemed
not,
denied.
it's not the applicant that has to be on the,
But
If I-
the,
if I
but
could
the
just
attorney
say-
is saying that we can
I would like to,
use discretion.
but it's not the applicant that is looking for the extra days. It's really the town, the planning board. So this does say within 30 days, the review shall approve or deny the application, within 30 days.
And
And
if
then
it's
there can
not,
be the
then-
extension.
Then it's
Then there can be an
deemed
extension.
approved.
But even then, the extension granted upon request shall not exceed 30 days. So we're kind of in a bind. Could we
What
have,
page are you on,
could we
Tom?
plan for this to be done on the next meeting, which is the 13th, and then have until the 29th to follow up on it?
Today's the 8th.
Today's the
the
8th.
next
Yeah, so
meeting
that's
is the
not
29th.
30.
The next meeting
Is
is the
the
29th
29th.
because
That's why
because
I-
of Thanksgiving.
yeah.
What section
And
are
we
you reading
Thanksgiving
from, Tom?
is in the way.
What's the?
It's 10-6-2-4.
So if we don't grant it, this is a hypothetical, of course, if we don't grant it, does he have recourse, does Mr. Stilfen have recourse to reopen? You know, so he gets to submit his,
Just to repeat my advice, which is that you try to work within the 30-day period, and you, I believe, can ask them to submit in advance of that meeting, on the 29th. I think you're within your power to do that, even though the ordinance doesn't specifically say that. I think you can do that. That enables the neighbors to get a chance to review things, you a chance to review things. If you're not satisfied at the meeting that's on the 30-day deadline, you say, look, we're looking at a denial here because we don't understand this, or we need more information, or we wanna take it to our own engineer, or we're convinced that, the neighbors should have the right to get their own engineer. And so we're gonna either deny this, or we can agree to, go to yet another meeting. And that would be the applicant's choice at
What
that
time
point.
does town hall close on Wednesday, the 21st? Is it a regular day, day before Thanksgiving? Or do they cut a half day?
Look on the,
Then I'm thinking
The web.
if they can get us the information by noontime on the 20th, just in case the town, or the 21st rather, in case the town hall decides to close early, that would give us 9 days, 8 days to review all of the information, and it would give the applicant.
I mean, we're trying to work it out so everybody, you know, gets a chance to review the information. You and Mr. Stilfen has a chance to, you know, craft another approach. And that way, fingers don't get pointed at us for not asking the right questions and not doing the right thing. And I'm so glad you're here today, so.
He was glad too, Paul.
Ted, is part of this approval or site plan approval, or is it totally conditional
This
use?
is conditional use using one process, which is the site plan approval process. So we use the process, but we review it under the conditions of approval for conditional use in section 9(2). But we use the site plan process.
Okay. And that's something we do consistently?
Yes. Well, since we changed it about a year and a half ago. So we're gonna have two different processes.
So if we say that he'd get us the information on the 21st, we'll have a week to review it. And the neighbors will have a week to review it, and then we can make a decision on the 29th.
Where in this does it stipulate that a project would be automatically approved if we did not make a decision? Because what I'm seeing is within the first 30 days, in number 3, 10.6.23, said it's referencing the staff review committee.
Right, but it denies it if it's the staff review, but you're right, I don't.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see-
normally ordinances don't default to an approval. I mean, I was
I was
surprised.
just
to
gonna
hear that.
say,
But if it does say that, then but.
we need to change it.
10.6 point,
We don't, we have
10.6.2
never been,
seems to be silent on the issue of the planning board.
we always had it. It shouldn't default to this, should we?
So then, as I'm saying, it needs to be rewritten, but it shouldn't
But it's
default
approved,
to an approval.
approved. My crystal ball ain't shining.
That's the administrative site.
Yes,
So,
this one.
plenary site.
yeah, I don't see it.
Number 5.
It's,
10.6.35.
Within 60 days after this, the planning board shall approve the conditions of denial. And they may get 2 extensions. Yeah, I see the 2 30-day extensions, I don't see.
What happens if you, doesn't say what happens.
Yes, no, it doesn't.
Imagine if you had a massive study on another case in a subdivision where it took 6 months. You had to get 6 months to get, this doesn't make sense if your hands are tied.
Right. I would surmise it's in the applicant's, and I've mentioned this before, would be in the applicant's best interest to be able to do our due diligence in, you know, in review of their project.
okay. So it's gonna- Yeah, so John's saying that he doesn't appear to be in there, and he has some recollection that it was recommended to be taken out, and thinks it has been taken out, because it would be odd, I've seen it, but it'd be rare. Usually if it's, things don't occur within a certain period of time, deemed a denial, not a
This isn't a
acceptance.
permit by rule.
Yeah, exactly, like a
That's the
permit by rule, the
exception,
DEP doesn't pick it off their desk when a certain period of days, that permit is approved automatically. That's a good analogy.
I can't imagine a court ever, whatever way this goes, I can't imagine a court finding this board by doing what you're graciously offering, and I think fairly offering to do, which is give both parties time to respond. And no court's gonna overturn that. And as you said, there's nothing in the ordinance that says it's an automatic denial or it's an automatic approval. It just has this hard language about 2 30-day extensions without any statement further about what happens if you go beyond that. I mean, the boards, this is your job. Your job is to actually make the rules fair for the public and the applicant. We're not trying to diss the applicant here either. If he wants to come up with something, that's fine. We just want to have a fair opportunity to respond.
Would you be able to get information by Wednesday the 21st?
Dave, your crystal ball ain't shining yet?
Well,
I'm not trying to be smart, that's my comment, I mean, you don't know, because that's what I'm saying.
we have a consultant who is a noise expert. He's not here tonight to tell us what his calendar is, so I'm praying he's not on vacation, for me to say, so yes, we're dead in the water if we don't submit by the 21st, I'm not prepared to do that.
But that's just exactly what we're offering. Why are we so focused on this hard and fast 30 days? If the board is going to take some liberties with those deadlines, it can benefit both sides. I don't think, Dave, unless you think.
If I can address that, the problem is taking liberties. If we take liberty with anything, I think we all feel vulnerable to being accused of being unfair.
What I suggest is you, take the applicant up on their, request for a 30-day extension, set the hearing for the date you said, which I think is the 29th. Require the applicant to submit 7 days in advance. That gives the neighbors the opportunity to respond, gives you the opportunity to, review it. If in the unfortunate event that the noise expert is on vacation or unreachable or ill or some other intervening cause, another request can be made and you can take it up at the meeting on the 29th. Because you just can't deal with a scenario where we don't have all the facts right now.
That's right, your crystal ball ain't shining.
Right, crystal ball ain't shining. That's my takeaway.
Yes,
They grant the 30-day extension, you're right.
so is that what we should do, grant the 30-day extension?
Yes.
With the caveat that they're gonna get their,
Yes, and
Yes,
if it
okay.
turns out that they can't get it, then they can come back to the board, we'll take it up from there.
I have a question, with the current 30-day extension, when does that expire? Can we get it today? It's today? Okay, so there's no wiggle room there.
Well, the question is, okay, if it can't be completed by the 29th for factors of unknown, crystal ball shining or whatever else not, how can we turn around and continue this? Because it turned out the time elements have elapsed.
no, but he said he can get it in by the 29th.
He doesn't
didn't
know.
He didn't know if he could have it by the 21st. He doesn't know if the week of Thanksgiving, he can actually get this guy to give him an opinion. That's why I suggested that maybe they get their paperwork in by the 29th.
You don't have to address the possibility of a third extension until it's
Until the 29th,
absolutely
right.
needed.
Okay,
Okay, so
I think that makes sense.
I think Billy, I think what we want is the submission by noontime on Wednesday the 21st. Because I don't know if town hall's gonna be open later than that.
I
So
understand
we
that
need to
too.
have that.
But what if, like, he is on vacation, he goes away for
Then you come,
Thanksgiving?
then you come
Are
back
we
here on
gonna
the,
get our 30 days?
you come back here on the
I don't
29th.
want us here, oh, no, you had your time, you're not gonna get it, cause we're getting a shot 30 days.
You come back on the 29th and we will address that issue. But
Okay.
right now,
Yeah,
it's
but
premature
would
to
I
address.
say that if something happens, that we do get the 30 days?
No, I'm saying it's premature for us to discuss that issue at this
Yeah,
point.
but I'm just saying, we're taking a shot chance right now,
Through the chair.
and we're getting pushed, because we're not getting our full 30 days.
Through the chair, question.
Hang on just for a second, Marty.
When's the first Thursday of December.
30 days from now is the 8th of December. That is a
Special
Friday.
meeting?
Could we meet the seventh of
We
December?
would have to have a special meeting at that point. And I don't know if the facilities are available.
I mean, we try to work with you too. It's been going on for 2 years.
Well, we're all looking for a solution here. I think if we have a little wiggle room,
I'm sorry. Yeah, they may have to.
Through the chair to ask a question.
But they would still get their paperwork
Right.
in on the 29th.
They would still have to have the paperwork in by the 29th.
But that would give them,
Okay?
that gives them.
So, yeah, Mark.
Chairman, they are going to try to find out when their consultant is available or vice versa. If they, David, can you tell us possibly if you're gonna be able to get your paperwork in between now and then by the 21st?
Yes, I think we can do that.
That's what my question is.
Okay.
I mean,
So-
if you know, tonight you don't know nothing. I mean, because you know,
But here's what we're looking at. We'll give you a 30-day extension. If you can get us the paperwork, we can make the decision on the 29th. If you cannot get us the paperwork, the deadline, we need to have it by the 29th at the last, and we will hold a special hearing on the 6th of December. It's the
7th of December.
Seventh.
Oh, the 6th.
The 6th, the first December the first Thursday in December on the 6th, and that will be a drop dead date.
So that gives you almost a week to look at things.
Part of which is Thanksgiving.
Well,
Right.
no, it's after.
It's actually more, it's 10 days, isn't it?
We would like to have it on the 21st.
Yeah.
If we can get it on the 21st, we'll have the 9 days to Thanksgiving to review it. If they cannot get it because their agent is out of town for whatever reason, they will give it to us on the 29th, and we will hold a special hearing on the 6th of December, which is the 30th day from today. Okay? All
I
those,
second that.
it's already been seconded.
Yeah,
All those
we-
in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Is that gonna work?
Hmm?
That'll work, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay, I say aye.
everybody's slightly disappointed, so that means.
That's a good decision. I mean, this noise guy shouldn't have to do that. He understands.
Okay. Next item on the agenda. This will not take too long. Raptor Falls plenary site plan. Hang on, guys, we're moving on to the next item. Raptor Falls plenary site plan review proposal to construct an 18-hole miniature golf course with a 9-foot single range building and associated off-site parking on an 8-acre site formerly Fritz's Tire, located at 1912 Portland Road.
You guys have bus, easily, yeah.
Tax map 15, lot 12.
I was thinking that earlier.
If you ever do another project, it will not be approved unless you come back.
Mr. Lankowski and Greg Duffy King are the owners of the applicant.
Yes, this is the next one here.
You guys have seen these plans lots of times.
These-
Is this a revised one?
This is the revised one with the driveway moved, basically over here.
Do we have any copies of it?
I have 3 copies of the large plans here that you guys.
And do the cottages, are they aware that you moved the driveway?
These are 9/13/18.
Is that the same date?
Oh,
Okay.
let them make the
Sorry.
presentation and then
Go
we'll go from there.
Yeah, so the three things basically where we left off last time was get the updated plans for moving the driveway back to its existing location. Have the sound study done, which we have, and confirm with the DOT that the site delineation is compliant, and they have, it's in the handout that I gave you guys. It's actually, it's compliant for whatever the standard is in both directions, and then he went on to say that there's an even higher standard and it's compliant for that as well.
Yeah, I think those are the missing pieces from last time.
Where on that plan is the septic system?
So I don't know if this plan shows the septic system.
Okay.
Where is it?
It's just to the north side of the clubhouse.
Oh, okay, because I was hearing to the south side, and I was expecting to see it further down.
Not in the bamboo,
Somebody
it can't
mentioned
be in the
south, and
bamboo.
I think
Well, I think,
inadvertently-
the issue is that it's south of Joe's property, which is why Joe said the
Right.
south, and I'm looking, where is it? Okay,
How far is that from the property?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You guys have a-
What's the
Pretty
distance?
gosh darn far. If you look at the handout that I gave you guys earlier, the sound guy actually dropped our course onto a Google map, and it's quite a ways away. There's, from the edge of this property right here, it's 250 feet to that property line over there, through the woods, and this is,
Yeah, this is where it's
Right,
done.
this is where they are.
Right.
yeah.
And that's 250 feet.
what is the
So the
height of
clearing
the
still would be,
clubhouse?
Clubhouse is way in the back of the,
No, it's
No,
right up here in the front.
Where Trixie's building.
which clubhouse we speaking of?
That's for the,
You had, you were talking
No, no,
about,
no, Raptor Falls.
okay, that's why I'm saying, you know, we got plenty of clubhouses,
Oh,
which
yeah.
one are we playing it?
the one that just Trixie's right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
That's the front office.
Okay.
yeah, so from, my estimation, they said,
Yeah,
with the property line.
And what do they have to be in order to be compliant with that?
okay.
How far does the septic have to be in order to be compliant? From the property line? Yeah. How far?
Boundaries, across the boundaries, I mean, how far is the sideline? It doesn't have any distance.
So that's something we'll need.
What page?
Yeah, it's quite a ways.
Which way is the leach field go?
Down.
Going south.
Going
Towards
south.
Route 1.
Going south,
Yeah,
It's actually southeast.
huh?
towards Route 1.
Oh, okay. So it's gonna go into the drainage ditch.
Well, hopefully not.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm going by lay of the land.
Well, you
It
can
says-
see where it is. It's sort of on an angle.
It's with the water. So it's in the south.
So do you have the property line on there?
It's right here.
Yeah, so here's the property
Should be
line.
the plan set. I got the same plan set you guys have.
Here's
What
the
page are
property
you on?
line and here's the septic just about. So it's like 200 feet away.
What page are you on in there?
From a noise standpoint, is this a full-on business district?
Yes, it's not BIS.
Where is,
Where's the
the Velociraptor?
We never saw his lips move.
Oh, no. So when I look at this plan, where's the T-Rex going?
Hopefully.
I don't see one.
T-Rex will probably be going.
Entrance to the parking lot.
Do you have any idea of how high the cliff is from there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Make it not as necessary to have, did you discuss with
Well,
them
T-Rex
that
isn't
you
the largest
move the entrance to the parking lot?
But, so where were the brackets on?
Good show, did you discuss with them in order to make the traffic to accommodate
Stars of animals.
for, so they moved the entrance to the parking lot.
They moved it south?
Yeah, it's basic,
Yeah.
yes.
North.
No.
Yeah, because the issue was that they were going to be impinging on Fritz's lane.
Too much
And
in.
it would have been too much of a conflict.
You didn't move it north.
Yeah, but it's just enough not to be
It's
obscured
where the
by
existing is, it's
The
existing
existing
there
driveway.
now.
Yep.
But the fact is, because you got the lane, existing, and then you have the office. Okay, where the existing is now is where it's gonna be.
So that's probably.
Did you guys, or has your engineer done any kind of estimate on the total trip generation? I know it's all dependent on customer or the anticipated trip generation for the project.
No, we haven't looked into any of that, only because previously, you guys have just asked us to basically contact the state and said we would defer to what they were doing. So that's all, that's the diligence that we've done so far.
So you have 56 parking spaces thereabouts? So even if you had 18 people on the golf course and 18 people waiting and another 18 people waiting, you'd be pretty much just about out of parking, and there couldn't be any more than that.
Correct.
And then some of that has to be employee parking too. Right.
I'm gonna pay this.
50 actual visitors. Golfers.
It is on Route 1, they have site distance. You know, if they don't meet the trip generation thresholds, the DOT is not going to, you know, mandate improvements to Route 1, right?
No, but if they feel that there is a site distance problem,
But they've addressed that.
And this is the
My-
existing
it's the
entrance.
opposite of what would happen with KKW.
My- My thought is to hash out the comment in public hearing about the traffic study.
We've had public hearing, all right?
Right, there was a comment about the
Yeah,
traffic study, or
Right,
lack
an
of a
issue that
traffic
came up.
study in the public hearing.
correct.
My question is, you know, since this is a DOT-owned road, not a town-owned road, what value would the traffic study be for a project that does not trip the peak hour threshold for the DOT to require a traffic study?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
In essence, it's all it's gonna do is say, we estimate it's gonna be this many cars per day, and Route 1 is designed to convey that traffic. Okay,
It's
so
not per
that's,
day,
that's
per
what we.
hour. I get it.
Right,
I know,
per
I'm
day,
just,
per hour,
I mean-
whatever, and Route 1 is designed to, you know, convey that amount of cars, and, you know, there you have it.
yeah.
Right. Ted, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that we can have whatever study we want, and we can also mandate whatever improvements we want, but if DOT doesn't agree with us, doesn't matter, does it?
Well, that's sort of my point, is
We could say we want a turning lane here.
Right.
And DOT could say, that's great, I want a lot of things.
we could say we want a
We're not
stoplight
gonna
there. We could say we want a stoplight, and
Yeah,
they
that's
say,
worked out well in the past.
Right.
But essentially, they've approved this, right? For all
They
intents and
haven't, they haven't
purposes.
denied that, that's the point.
Right, that's the difference. They
Is
don't
that
approve it,
within
they
the
just
30
have to
day?
approve
Is this within the 30-day acceptance?
What? 30 day? No, that was the last one.
No, I'm talking about how they say if they don't,
No, no,
it. No, that's a permit by right,
That's
that's,
not,
that's
DOT
different.
does not operate that way, DEP does, sort of, but, DOT says, yeah, we're gonna give you your permit, we'll get it.
okay, but here's another good question. How can they tell if it needed a study when you don't have any comparisons because this is completely new?
For us.
No, completely new for the study for this location.
Go by formula,
Yeah, but,
get the business.
but
They
like you
looked at
said,
it,
you're
though.
going, you're going by
They didn't feel
parking
it
spots.
needed-
You can't squeeze,
Yeah, I believe, didn't Anthony come out?
Oh yeah, they came out, they measured everything, they inspected the site visually.
So DOT was out there and they measured everything and they, yeah, they did their analysis and they didn't even come close to,
that's what I'm saying.
right, so.
Is this site going to be open
No.
year round?
No.
Seasonally?
Yeah.
Okay. I need to check, because that's the reason it can be gravel.
No, they aren't gonna make it a sled park in the wintertime.
There's one in Wyndham, and wouldn't you just love to send all of those folks sliding onto Route 1?
Well,
Then we
true.
need a traffic study.
Well, no, you need crossing guards.
Yes.
And your neighbor over here may not appreciate them sliding into his front yard.
So how do we get them to get on their way so they can make some
yeah,
decisions
really.
about the property and get themselves going? Is there anything, have we done everything we need to do tonight?
I
We just
believe
approval.
So
that
do we,
we have addressed everything, have we not?
Well, I haven't seen the new drawings yet.
Oh, okay, so you need to get a complete set of plans prepared with all of the
No,
information and all of the other fun stuff.
We have till
We have 30 days, we have until the,
30 days now, yeah, to take over these and see if we have any issues.
Yep.
And some of the issues that were raised in the public hearing.
so should we try to get it
put them
organized by the 29th
by the 29th
of what?
of
of
November?
November.
Okay,
It could be in December, Mark.
Before we get to that though, I just wanna, clarify that the traffic issues, I wanna, I'm just curious how close the expansion of the expanded lanes will come to this property and this project? From the seasonal cottages, would there be required to add some lanes there?
How close to this property will that turning lane end up being?
Through the chair, I can't give the exact distances, it goes beyond our I think the total distance of all the improvements was something like 1,100 feet, based back then on a 50-mile-an-hour zone, which has been partially reduced, so that's a concern. We'd be happy to provide the DOT traffic permit with a concept design. You could have your engineer overlay it on your plans and indicate on the plans, I can't tell you exactly where it is, but it's,
Okay.
yeah, that, we'd be happy to provide that, in fact, it's the contact information.
So, so, Rick or Joe, just so we understand, is you referenced a commercial development which would require these traffic improvements, correct?
True,
Is that right?
True.
Is that on the same side of the road as the?
Correct.
So you would be essentially doing a turn lane into or thereabout your development,
so in other words.
and they would have a bypass lane going around, a slip lane going
If
around
you
it.
come north.
Yep.
From the south, it would be a stacking lane.
Yep.
If you're coming north, south on the south side, okay, there would be a deceleration lane, and then if you come out and you're going south, coming out of our property, there would be an acceleration lane.
Okay.
We have 1,400 linear feet of frontage, we have to improve 1,100 linear feet.
But we'd be happy to provide, it's a concept sketch, the way the DOT works. You could have your engineers overlay it on your plans very easily, and just to demonstrate where the beginning and end of those lanes are. I can't sit here and tell you
If
exactly.
you could, that would be useful.
Ultimately, I mean, from that perspective, it's nice information to know, but presumably the work will be in the right of way or, you know, land that you guys have to acquire, so,
Right.
really doesn't directly impact this site plan.
No, it only impact the entrance or something like that, it's just a coordination thing, I'm not sure where the new entrance is, but my suspicion is that the lanes start to the north of where somewhere about where Fritz's house is, but again, I don't wanna say for certain until we look at the plan, but we'll provide that to you if I have some contact information, we'll be happy to send that to you.
Okay.
Question. Could you show me where the transfers and where the fracking source is going?
Does the board have any other questions
Yes.
for the applicant? Marty?
The thing is, when we're looking at, does it show property line?
I see the stars.
Because we always, when we look at a site plan, it always shows
506.
our property line.
This one does not.
But they,
I
they
mean-
submitted one in the application
Oh,
that
okay,
has,
yeah, the one in the.
We don't. If
Yeah.
you go look in your packet, it didn't.
No, but we've got to
Just,
put the one.
it's just.
yeah, in the application,
Here's the
Ted was just looking at it. There
That
was
was
a
his.
plan,
We couldn't find it. That's why we're asking. That's why I'm asking the question.
Maybe it's buried in there. That, as much as I care about. That's the stakes. There's the, okay, there's the stakes.
That's a whole, actually.
I know it is, but that, I know it's like sense there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning.
Hey, you do have it. That's in the first package you guys got. This is the property. So I'll just take your chairs up. Thank you.
Right, but the property
they were the plans, I believe, that were
First one over here, second one over there. What page is that? That's where the brackets are. So he's done 5%. Even if this is less than.
This here, maybe the property line, this is, my, height and elevation.
Yeah. No, he has a problem.
Yeah, plus the notes.
Right, session, I back on that. Two packages. We've had two folders, or three folders.
There's been a lot of plans.
So, do the numbers line up? This is Rich.
Rich.
Yes,
Well, that's what I'm wondering, I gotta get some verification from him.
no, it's a seasonal use, and as a seasonal use, he's allowed to do it on ground.
Yes, but my question was, when you cut me off in public hearing, was to ask how the fact was that the reception when they came out of the big clubhouse, how many of the,
By all-
well, I wanted to ask at the public hearing, and you said no.
But it's not appropriate at the public.
Right.
hearing. It's not appropriate for us to ask any questions in the public hearing, that is for the public and the applicant. If we get the confusing questions.
Slap me.
No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Tom do it, he seems to be able to do it.
He's got 5
You got other people waiting. This is an office visit.
Hey, Chad.
Ted, do we have a question for the applicant?
Now, when you met at Cape Arundel Clubhouse, did you have a good response from, or was it just a spare response of number of neighbors?
Oh, as far as how many people attended?
Yeah.
There was quite a bit of people. Yeah, you could probably speak to the number.
I think there are about 30 to 35 people, so 15 to 17.
Cause I know we
cottage
talked
owners.
about it, but we were gonna communicate to see how it went, instead of just the 2 letters. That's why I'm going at for,
Oh, it did, I think they did alleviate a lot of the concerns. The one that was left that everybody was questioning, and we even did a site walk on, was the traffic.
Yeah.
That was the fear, but they did do a very nice job, and the majority of the people, I got the impression from them that they left feeling a little bit better and a little bit more comfortable.
Okay, that's why I turned just communicating to the board so that we kinda have an idea.
Yeah.
I think we should
Thank you.
get a consensus or at least some kind of feel from the board of whether anything additional will be needed for the traffic.
So they're sort of in purgatory
Right.
right
So
now.
do you-
They
I mean,
can't get
otherwise,
anything done.
they've got a plan set that's been provided to Tad. Chad's gotta do his review. If there's anything else that needs to be provided before the next meeting, we need to make them aware of that.
So the question has come up about a traffic study and whether or not we think that it would be appropriate to have one done. And I don't think it makes a difference personally, because MDOT has said, here's your driveway, you don't need to do a traffic study. So, I mean, we could tell the applicant to spend the money and have the traffic study done, and whatever the traffic study shows, MDOT will probably say, we don't care, because they've already told you, do this. And we have absolutely no authority to force MDOT to do anything. Even if the traffic study says you're gonna have 9,000 trips an hour, we don't have the authority to make MDOT do anything. I'm perfectly willing to accept MDOT's thoughts on that one, because it is a state road, it's their responsibility, and there's not a whole lot that we as a planning board could do. If this were on Limerick Road, or on some other road, absolutely.
It won't happen anyway, even if we suggest it.
Well, we.
Look at the town hall coming up.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other issue, Mike.
And part of your communication and application to the DOT was an estimate on the number of trips generated? Was there anything there that you had to say you would be less than 100 trips per hour, or?
They basically just said that that business falls well below the threshold for what they would consider to be, that's all the information we
Yeah, it was their standards.
I know we tried to look for the ITEs, which is whatever it is that they use to figure this stuff out, we couldn't find one.
I think that he gave us a link to it or something in there. He said he linked some studies or something that reference it, but he said that we're well on.
I have always found when you give me a link, if it's on paper, I can't type it in and have it go out there. It has to have that little blue color in order for it to. So if you send it to us, send it in blue.
So how can we help them get this thing moving?
Well, I think at this point, Tad has to review the plans and make sure everything is okay. Are there any issues that anybody has with what's going on, so that we could then proceed forward?
Should we vote on whether or not we think they need a traffic plan?
We can,
Okay, I
if you
think we
think that's
should.
appropriate, make a motion.
I do, I move that we vote on whether or not,
Oh, no,
No.
make a motion as to whether or not we have the study or we don't have the study.
I make a motion, okay, you make a motion, I'm not.
Okay,
gonna make
okay,
sure.
You need to.
Okay, make a motion.
No, because I was gonna abstain because
Oh, okay,
Okay, I make a motion that
Thank
we dispense with the requirement for a traffic study.
Second.
I like that.
Motion has been made and seconded to dispense with the traffic study. Any discussion?
Yeah, my only concern is how close that extension, the acceleration lane would go. So I don't know if that would impact.
The
with
DOT,
traffic.
We can't
Yeah.
the
make
DOT
them.
said it was okay. I mean,
And that's the
as
issue.
it exists.
DOT may do this acceleration lane 6, 8 months from now.
So you said they would have that, all those facts.
And
Yeah.
DOT looked at everything. and
If they got into the design, the improvements for the commercial project, yeah.
Okay, any other discussion?
Yes,
Yeah, Mike.
now, the acceleration rate is 100, okay, which is a next door neighbor. and as Tom was asking, this is another project which is south. Will that turn on the acceleration question of the lane coming out and for incoming traffic? Because you're gonna have a still crossover.
If DOT
But
has,
DOT may not, they looked at one project, but we're using this as a consolidation of two of them, of the acceleration lane and,
And I understand what you're saying. My position on it is that DOT didn't wanna have any of that work done, so why
Okay.
should we tell the applicant to do it?
no, I'm just saying, so we know how
Yep.
we're thinking, that's where I'm drawing my lines.
Yep, understandable. Any other questions, any other comments? Motion has been made to indicate that a traffic study is not required. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Wait a minute, somebody be opposed, we have a unanimous decision. Okay.
That solves a lot of problems.
We will put you on the agenda for the 29th. We don't need anything else, do we, Ted?
I need some,
Well, whatever
I need
Ted
some-
needs.
we need to fix that topo discrepancy, okay? And then I'm gonna need 10 sets for these guys. Okay.
Not the big
So
size.
Ted, what,
We need an easel, otherwise I don't come
can I
back.
ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Ted, what is the topo discrepancy that, is it still more on the grading end of things?
No, it's not between the numbering of the contours, there's a discrepancy in the contours between the detail and the overall.
The one from the surveyors using 100s and our engineer, I guess, is using 500s.
Yeah, that needs to be cleared up.
I have a question for Joe.
Yes,
When you were, in the public hearing, when you were first making your comments, you said something about lighting.
in other words, some of these, you have some uplights on these, creatures probably, the dinosaurs,
Okay.
at night, I would assume, to light them up?
We hadn't planned on it.
Well, that was my only concern, was if you have the uplights, and it's 26 feet high, what's gonna happen, you know, in terms of that light over the trees and
Okay,
stuff?
that's.
Because we're at a higher elevation than they are to begin with, at Adams Lane.
We don't have any plans for any uplights.
Okay.
They're all
Okay.
down there.
Good enough. We shall see you on the 29th.
Can I just ask, is there anything else like other than that topo discrepancy, and you need, we've got 3 big copies, do you want 7 smaller copies, or do you need 7?
Yeah, well, why don't you wait until you fix the topo first? But you're gonna need to provide these gentlemen and maybe.
And the easel.
Civil engineers are bound to have them.
Do we need to take big copies like that, or can we have, that's what I'm,
It's already busted 2.5 files.
huh?
Thank you very much. On to the next item.
But I know, just run straight.
Yeah.
You were hiding, bent over it while you was left, Jason. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a set. I wanna look at these. Just check these.
Brookside Estates.
Butter out.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. Brookside Estates, revision of approved subdivision plan. A discussion with action. Remedial landscape plan for the required 25-foot landscape buffer on lot 9, approved Brookside subdivision located at 182 Log Cabin Road, tax map 32, lot 14C, in the R3 and Shoreland Overlay Districts. J Group LLC is the owner applicant. The owner's agent is Jason Neto. So what are you proposing, Jason?
Tad, provide you with that drawing.
You did.
That's my lot 10. If you remember in the finding of facts, there was some overcut on lot 10 and the lots were cleared.
Okay, that's a generous description.
That's our That's my replacement plan of the trees that were, that's basically infilling some of the 25-foot buffer that was disturbed.
Jason, you mind coming up front so you can see us? I mean, instead of back there? I mean,
Does it work?
yeah.
I thought you were sick of seeing me, Marty.
Huh?
I thought you were sick of seeing me.
No, I usually see people up front when they're talking to the planning board, instead of in the back, you can't see it.
What,
I know I'm
what's
short.
the species?
Excuse my pronunciation, but Abies balsamia.
Balsam trees.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have on hold 6 to 7 foot of those trees.
Ted, and I assume Jason's probably coordinated this with you?
I've gone out to the site and took a look at it,
Yep.
and, he's also got some, suitable soil in there for it. Yeah, I have.
Are you good with what he's proposing?
Yeah, I think that we'll fill in the holes, but, you know,
Yep.
any new material isn't going to be, we're not gonna get 100% buffer right off the bat.
Right.
We will over time.
I haven't been down that way in a little bit. Lot 1 is directly across the road from it, is that right?
Yep, right, yep. That's the one that we created the buffer on.
That buffer in and planted and
Yep.
doing well and all that good
There's,
stuff?
I think there's 30, no, I'm sorry, 24 arborvitae's on the top of it.
Right.
As the board may remember, the applicant is vented from joining building permits until such time that the planning board approves the remediation plans. And approve one remediation plan, this is the remediation plan for the second one.
And do you see any reason why we wouldn't approve it,
The way it's proposed now.
or shouldn't it?
No,
Or
I
shouldn't
intend, no.
approve it?
No, I think, you know, it's, what it does is it's gonna fill in the lower, it's gonna fill in the, what happens, the understory was gone. You probably remember. There are tall trees, they're about 60, 70 feet, maybe a little bit less. And all the understory was cut, so you can see right through them, it's like columns there.
Yeah.
What this will do is, this will basically be filler in between those. And it'll grow, actually, eventually, it'll grow pretty tall. They'll fill in, they'll grow about maybe 20 feet wide. And in the, what it will do is it'll basically fill in that space that's in between for the moment down.
Yeah, Mitchell and Associates seem to think it would fill in quite nicely.
Yep.
So the question is, do we want to go down and take a look at it, or do we want to approve it?
Look at what? The empty spot, or turn what is presently there?
Well, what is
I mean,
presently
because
there?
I haven't been down along that way either in ages.
It's what is presently there, and he will be planting these trees. So we have an option, we can go down and we can look at it, or we can say, really? Seriously? I don't wanna go look at it, let's just vote.
What are
and
your
say-
thoughts?
My thoughts on it? Seriously? I don't wanna go down and look at it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright.
well,
And this is
question,
a
I have,
licensed landscape architect who's,
We,
I
yeah,
have
we
a-
have something here from some guy that said,
Yeah.
this is gonna fix the problem.
when is this
Okay.
gonna be done?
That's
Is the next question.
Yeah.
Are we gonna drag it out?
No, I mean, I'd love to do it right now, honestly, but I gotta admit, it's gonna be tight for that excavator to put that septic system in the back if those trees are planted right now. So I think I would maybe ask the board, they'll be planted before occupancy, does that help you guys?
No, remember beforehand, when we planted, when we did plant, we were playing the season so that things could get, and they didn't burn out and everything else along the way. That's why I'm asking the question, because we delayed by putting in the first section.
Well, the first section was attached to lot one, correct?
Yeah,
There's nothing on lot one.
Are
So
you saying-
when do you anticipate occupancy? Sorry, Mark.
I'm thinking April.
So you'd be looking to go in early spring?
Yeah,
as
that would
early
be
as
my-
you could get in there and put them in the ground.
And I gotta admit, right now it is a mud bath right there. It
Where is it in the mud bath?
Oh, it's absolutely crazy. And I just hate to narrow that field for the excavator any more than it already is. Like I said, I have 8 of them on hold. I can put them on the site if that makes you feel any better, but
You gotta hill them in,
Yeah,
you gotta hill them in the ground.
but you gotta have, because otherwise they'll burn and freeze, the roots and everything else.
So it doesn't matter if you do them there, or you do them, do you have any more, topsoil piles left?
we can make some, yeah.
Okay. Just put them in the ground, don't take them out of the buckets, and water the.
How about this? No occupancy, it could be, done until, by the spring.
I'm happy with that, and I don't care where you keep it.
I need some
In
clarification.
all honesty, I just assume them keep them, because if anything happens to the trees, they'll give me.
Oh,
Yeah,
you don't have them on
right.
site?
I need
No,
clarification though.
they're holding them for me, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's okay,
Yeah,
they're
Tom.
responsible for it.
I thought the, agreement was you couldn't get a building permit until this was completed.
Correct.
So you're talking about an occupancy.
I threw that out.
You can't
but the
get
building, the
occupancy.
building's not up yet, is it?
No,
He
we
doesn't
haven't
have
even
permits.
started.
Yeah,
anything.
he doesn't have the permit, but
Right.
what he's saying is that he would like to have the building done so that
No,
it can be
no,
occupied, so he can
no.
get an occupancy
He
permit.
can't have the building done without a building permit.
But if we approve this plan, he'll be able to get the building
Now,
permit.
it's been 2 years now,
I know.
so what's the rush?
Well, but, I mean,
No, it can't be 2 years.
It's actually been more.
And maybe more,
Some more.
yeah. You have had time,
good reading.
Yeah, I'm,
and if you get it done in the next few months, or in the next few weeks, then you can get your permit and have the building in.
but I'm perfectly willing to accept the plan based upon the recommendation by the landscape architect that said, this is gonna fix the problem and it'll resolve the issue.
That's a plan, we need to have it in
In
place, we need to have it completed.
I don't see how it could happen.
I don't know if I would agree with that.
Well,
I do understand your reticence, because we've had plans before and nothing has ever
Nothing,
happened.
and
and
it
we've
almost went
extended it out.
backwards.
So, I mean-
There were plans and they weren't, not only not followed, but the trees were cut. And so that's what we wanted to make sure it would get completed before issue, all we had was building permits to be sure it would get done.
I think we should stay with that.
We can do that if you gentlemen want to. I don't have a problem with that one either. I'm just looking at it going, I want this to be off our plate.
Well, it could be done in a few weeks, next meeting, we'll be glad to move along.
I can't put a septic system in without a building permit. And my argument is I cannot get equipment to that rear corner if those trees get planted.
But you can't put the septic in without a building permit.
That's what I just said.
And but you can't get a building permit until the landscaping is done.
So no, that's my
But
argument here.
that puts in between a rock and a hard place, because
The
if we
rock-
say, put
the
those
rock-
trees in,
The rock was moved 2 or 3 years ago.
I know, I agree. I'm just
So-
pointing out the fact that if we tell him that he has to put those trees in, he's not gonna be able to put the septic system in.
Well, what happened over the last 3 years?
Yeah, Jason, what's the, sort of the obstacle within the lot?
I mean, I, to my defense, I wait for these lots to sell in order for progress to start on these lots. I don't have funding to just build 10 houses out of my pocket.
But the trees, what do they cost, $500 to get them all in or something?
I know they're $310 a piece, so there's $2,500 in trees there. So my argument is, if those trees got planted, let's say a year ago or 2 years ago to your argument, and now my excavator drives over all those trees to put the septic system out back, because that's the only means of passage to the rear of that lot. So now I gotta buy 8 more trees?
I'm
I don't know why
confused.
it's the only passage.
Yeah, I'm confused as to why it would be the only passage. There's no building there.
There
There's
isn't, but
nothing
you,
to prevent the
when a
excavator.
septic system goes in, you have to establish grades. So essentially, the septic system goes in after the foundation is poured.
Okay.
It's all determined on elevation,
So because of the width of the lot.
it's the smallest lot there.
Once you get the foundation in.
Correct.
They're only gonna be able to run around to the
That left side is the
cabin
only
side,
option.
road side of that lot line.
Yeah, good point, good point. I mean,
Why are we talking about, it doesn't seem to me that all the trees are an issue in order to get access. Maybe a few of them.
I don't, well, the septic system goes beyond tree 8.
Oh, we can't put a tree on a septic system.
That's what I'm saying, the septic system, the plume for the septic system is
Oh,
beyond.
the plume's fine, yeah.
I guess I'm, given the restrictions of the lot, I would be okay modifying our original condition to be the occupancy permit, so he can coordinate the construction activities, get the trees planted after the septic system goes in, but before any kind of occupancy is allowed. I mean, at that point, he's gonna have a whole lot of money invested into that lot. And, he's gonna be needing the occupancy permit. There's gonna be no advantage for Jason to delay on getting those trees planted.
I have 2 lots left over there, lot 10 and lot 1.
And lot one is already landscaped, is it not?
No, lot
It's
1
not.
is, yeah,
Okay.
no.
Well, I thought you
The
said
buffer.
the buffer, you
Oh,
planted buffer.
landscape, yeah, right, yeah, the berm is there.
Through the chair,
Yes.
from a survivability standpoint, I'd rather have a spring planting than a fall planting. At this point, this is late fall planting for Boston.
Mhm.
Because the problem is that it doesn't have enough water, and it isn't watered regularly. At this point in time, it can be desiccated by the tree spring.
I mean, that's an issue. I tend to agree with Jamie in terms of the restrictions that are on that lot, or that would indicate that, to me, it indicates that we need to accept it. Am I happy with the idea? No, given my choice, and drawn and quartered and all kinds of other mean nasty ugly things come to mind. But I want this out of the way, I want this done, and based on the criteria for the lot, it appears that the appropriate thing to do would be for us to approve this plan, and with the condition that no occupancy permit is issued.
And no
Until such
substitutes,
time as the trees have been planted,
and no substitutes.
and no substitutes. Those trees are the ones that need to go in there.
How about on or before April 30th?
We still have snow on the ground on April.
No, if he does not put these trees in, he's not getting an occupancy permit.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
And if that doesn't happen until next year in September, then it's next year in September.
It's a lot of interest payments, Rich.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. I had a bunch of contractors for clients, I understand the issue. I just need somebody to make a motion one way or the other, up, down, or sideways.
So I will move we approve the amended or I guess we amend the condition, the original condition on lot 10 to allow the building permit to be issued based on the planting plan that was provided, but no occupancy permit to be issued until those plantings have taken place.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the amended plan, subject to conditions.
Discussion?
Absolutely,
Yeah, with no substitutes.
with no
I was just
substitutes.
thinking.
And
Right.
is there some utility to adding a date by which the trees will go in?
Yeah, I said April 30th,
subsequently
but
to the issuance of any, construction.
No, because if they construct it over the winter, it's not a spring planting, okay?
Well, it depends on what kind of time frame we put on it.
Yeah. Jason, are you realistically looking to go in and break ground? Yeah. Very, so yeah, Ted,
I got a time crunch on cement. and
if we
cold
were to
weather's
do
coming.
that by April 30th, would that be getting too late in the year if you, in the spring, if you delayed for that type of tree to stay, you know?
April's fine, it's just gotta be watered on a regular basis, and considering the high water table out there, I mean, that may not be a problem.
It won't be a dry planting then.
Okay, so we're looking at the trees being in by April 30th, and no occupancy permit being issued until the trees are in,
right,
Right.
that's exactly right.
okay?
Yeah.
And no
Everybody's-
substitutes.
And
And
no
no
substitutes, it
substitutes.
has to be the trees that you've indicated.
I'll gladly have them delivered to the site, I just.
No, no,
No,
no.
no,
you
no, don't
can-
do that.
You can keep, let the
Let
other
them
guy
keep
keep
it,
them, I
yeah.
agree with you, let him
Yeah.
keep them, he's got the
He's got the
responsibility for it.
for me.
Are you happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other Tom?
Well, no, I'm not, because,
Okay.
but that's okay, everybody else is, so,
Any other discussion on the issue? Hearing none, all those in favor,
Aye.
all those
Aye.
opposed? 5 and 2.
All right.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Raymond Acres, a re-subdivision pre-application. A proposed re-subdivision of lots 5-03 and addition of 0.63 acres from lot 5A to create a fourth buildable lot in the Raymond Acres subdivision located at Black Dog Road, tax map 30, lots 5-03 and 5A in the R2 and SP districts. Marianne Raymond is the owner, Nicholas Raymond is the applicant. And, okay, you guys, as I see these people, I don't know who they are.
I'm Dwight Raymond, Nicholas Raymond, and significant other, Emily. What we're proposing to do is cut a little over a 4-acre lot, cut 2 acres off, which would have normally been enough for a building lot, but after they did the wetland delineation, it comes up short, so we're working on a tentative agreement with one of our butters to sell us a piece of property to give us 2 acres of buildable land. And that's what we're proposing. So that's a full-size plan there that shows the.
You can bring yours on an easel with
There's an easel here, I don't wanna take it up there, I don't want to take a in there.
I do.
I got a pretty color.
Basically,
He's big
Sit
enough.
out here.
The human easel.
Yes.
this is the 4-acre parcel that is present where we built the house here. We're proposing to whack off 2 acres of this, which would be this entire piece. And that would be 2 acres, but when you do the wetland delineation, we come up short. So we're proposing buying this piece from the butter, and that would give us a 2+ acre lot of good land.
And where would the house be going on this?
The house would be going, there's a,
test.
the test is in here, the house would be going about here, our
Okay.
house is here, and the neighbor's house is there.
And this is a cul-de-sac that I see running up through?
It is, it was originally approved with a cul-de-sac. We're actually killing a couple birds with this stone.
Yes, you are.
There was a original subdivision which I had on plan. Yeah, why don't you grab it?
97, Dwight? Or,
84, 85.
Okay, oh, yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And this showed the 4 lots, it was a minor subdivision.
Okay.
The fellow up front here, this is our lot. This was Sean Walsh's, new people moved in, and this is my brother Stacy up front. It showed a cul-de-sac. Well, when the lots were sold, these people chose not to come in off this road, they came in off the main road. So all we presently have is a single road going into our house. So, when Sean Walsh, who originally sold the lot to, built his house, he built it too close to the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, didn't you make a change though? You made a change.
Yeah, I'm going to that plan next.
Okay.
So, well, actually, I can use this one. So, what Sean Walsh did is he came before the board and he made a presentation to, which I agreed on and all the abutters signed off on, which is in the package. It shows this getting squared off. And that would have cured his problem. But then that makes a new problem for us because we wouldn't have the frontage. So we're proposing going back to the cul-de-sac that was originally designed, but just swinging it over a little bit. Having it swing over just a little bit, giving 75 foot of frontage for Nick's new lot and us having 75 feet for our existing lot. So that, then we could get the deed cleared up for the neighbor so that it's correct in the assessor's office because they show a whole different thing. So that plan was approved in concept, but then it was never finalized because Sean Walsh was supposed to pay for the legal work to change the deed and pay for the additional land that he was getting. And it never happened, and he sold the lot, and it sold a couple times, and nobody picked it up, except the people who were gonna buy it prior to the people who were there, their title people picked it up. So we'd be straightening out his mess as well in doing this.
Looking at this plan, it appears that that cul-de-sac runs right into the pond, on the edge.
That's just the right of way of it though.
Well, that's, yeah.
That's just the right of way,
That's just the right of
that's
way,
not the
okay.
actual paving.
Okay.
Or
Hopefully.
paving gravel, whatever it is.
So the reason we wanted to come before the board is we've met with Tad several times is we've already spent quite a bit of money getting this all done because this wasn't the first abutter we worked with. We worked with the Searles and some other people and there were reasons that it couldn't be done. So the surveyors had to go and do all this work on all these different properties and set pins and do whatnot. So we didn't want to go any further where we actually made the purchase from the abutter and we divided the land off to him and get into whatever engineering might need to be done on the road until we know the concept that it's something the board would consider doing.
I think it's a pretty creative solution.
It works.
A tough problem, yeah. My only question is, looks like the right of way goes through, what happens with that?
Which way was that?
Up where the new land will be purchased up to the left, right there,
Right up,
yeah.
right up there.
That would stay, that's Marcel's, that would stay.
So, okay, so that's been granted to
Yes.
people in back and that
Right.
doesn't get affected.
And we've agreed in our agreement with him that we would not be building or developing any of that, that it would be over here. Which was important to him.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very nice of him to
yeah.
do this, and he really didn't want to part with the land, but he's sympathetic to, a young couple wanting to build it alone. We're grateful.
Intent is that they are required to have 2 acres of upland with
2
the
acres of
subdivision,
land.
is that?
2 acres of land.
But we have to deduct the wetland, right?
Correct. You had, for
Right.
that residential density, they had
It's
to
2 acres.
special land.
Right, so that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to have that other piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's very wet down through there.
Yeah, it's a tough piece. That's got shore.
Yeah, I mean, you're
it's a
just looking
shoreline
for a
stream there.
conceptual,
I
not,
just want to know that it can be done, that we can make that division of what was a prior approved subdivision.
yeah, I mean, any issue?
And then we'll get all the material to finish it
There'll
up.
still be enough, room for setbacks for the new house?
Yes,
Okay,
and all the soils work's been done.
that's, okay, good.
What the board usually does in this situation, if you wanna go out and take a look to see if there's anything else that they should know about before they finalize this, spend money to finalize this, and do the road design. So if there's an issue the board finds, or if they have any waivers they wanna ask, this would be the time to do it, and we should do it before the snow flies. So I'd hate to have the situation where you guys do all this engineering stuff, these guys have to go out and in the field, and it's all snow covered, you can't understand, so.
I
My
would,
recommendation is to do it as soon as possible.
I would say that a Saturday would probably work out better, because it's dark 30, really early now.
Right.
It is.
Well,
So I'm thinking the 17th.
17th, very early in the morning.
Define
I
it.
can see
The
it
earlier
too.
we do it, the better chance that I'm gonna be able to be there.
Yep.
Because if we get too much into the morning, I probably won't. I've got something going on towards the middle of the day, so.
Gentlemen, you let me know what, I can be there at any time after the sun comes up on Saturday morning, because I don't have to go to work
8
anymore.
o'clock?
Mine.
I can do it at 8 o'clock, because it depends on the rest of the board.
You have it whenever it is.
I won't be able to
You
do
leave
it
it whenever it is.
You don't have one?
Yeah, we
Oh, I
did,
have
one
one.
of Murray's,
I'm out of
he
town.
has one over there.
And that's true, in order to notify the abutters, you're looking for.
State, that's it. Right, map 30, which is this way, are those all, these three lots, are those all accessible from Route 1? Yes, these aren't landlocked, because it turned out you have Route 1,
No, they have,
you have Route 1 accessibility.
On the
Right.
17th.
That's what I was asking it that
How
way.
many people do
We
we
don't.
be
They
there?
do.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is, I didn't know if there was a division somewhere in between here and Route 1.
No, there isn't.
So
They-
this is all, it's like Mr. Mackles, how he turns around and runs.
right, they wanted to, but the road cost would have been so expensive. they wanted to do it.
Yeah, but I understand it, but I was just wondering to make sure.
As present, it is.
if these aren't landlocked, because they have Route 1's over here, and this is all part of it. That's
Right.
503.
Yeah, right on Route 1.
Yeah. That's why I was just
Pensacola at 5:14.
inquiring, so.
Yep.
I just crossed the time limit someplace, because
So
there's no
you-
way it's in 11.
You going out of Portland?
No, I'm sorry, I'm going out of Boston.
So which
Oh, you
date
don't
we
have
gonna
one?
do? The 17th, is it?
17th at 8 AM,
8
we
AM
just
on the
need somebody to
17th.
make a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for a site walk on Saturday,
17th?
November 17th at 8 AM.
Question
We will see you
for the
then.
applicant,
Thank you.
turn around, and can it be staked so we can see what we're looking at?
Oh, there's stakes everywhere.
No, I know, but I mean, no, I mean.
Yes, we'll stake where the house is gonna be.
Yeah.
The soils, flag is already hanging in the tree.
And we'll be-
8 AM.
You know,
8 AM.
just to give us guidelines, that's all.
Sure.
You know,
And I'll meet you guys and we'll go over the whole thing. Question, after the site walk, what would be our next step?
The next step would be to submit a completed application to the town planner, so that we can put you on the agenda.
Perfect.
And at the meeting, I mean, we could discuss, the board can discuss any issues they have and any submission requirements that you have.
I have to tell you, it looks as if we'd be looking at like the 13th of December to have you on the agenda. Because we wouldn't have enough time to get them on for the 29th.
yeah.
Well, okay.
So the earliest would be the 13th.
Why not the 29th?
Well, because we don't have, I
Yeah.
need it tonight.
What?
He'd have to give us
application.
he'd have to give us a complete
Final drawings.
application tonight, so that we could put him on the agenda.
The application we gave wasn't complete enough.
Oh, you're gonna have to do, yeah, I'm gonna need the road stuff too.
Oh, okay. Right.
We haven't done
So
that
are we
yet.
That was
going
another
the
reason why I
17th?
wanted some sort of blessing before we spent that
I
money.
wanted you to.
Sure.
Just let you know, I won't be able to make it that date, so
Okay.
hopefully the rest
So
of you could.
we have a motion. All those in favor?
Yay,
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll even be there at 8
Okay.
o'clock.
So it looks as if we'll have 5 of us on the meeting, at the site walk.
Where you going?
I'm going to Alabama, but I'm leaving Saturday morning at 4 AM.
Get your grits.
No, I don't eat grits, brother. Grits and chitlins, man, I'm not eating that stuff.
Why are you going down there?
It's a business trip. I'm going for the crawfish and the ribs. No,
Oh, you
I don't
got
like
that part
crawfish.
of
I
Bring
it.
your shine back with you.
So where should we meet you? On,
On the road.
Right at the house, right
Right at Black Dog Road,
okay,
Right at the
halfway down, we'll be right there,
Yep.
right where that proposed cul-de-sac is.
got it.
Yeah, right at that driveway
Yeah.
goes off.
Yeah.
Okay?
We good?
All right,
We're
good.
Thank you,
guys.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for being so patient.
I almost forgot what we came for.
I can't imagine
Why, it's
why.
past your bedtime, ain't it?
Yeah, it is. See you later, guys, thanks. Good?
Okay, on to. So we're now,
I don't know, that's a good question.
does anybody,
Sorry, we talked about land.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out where
I wanna go home,
where the affidavits are.
go see my family before we go to bed.
I have it.
You had a folder.
For what?
With the affidavits.
I signed an affidavit.
Yeah,
Right.
we know you did.
Yeah,
We did.
and I had it, I'm just trying to find out where it is.
2007.
That's Brookside.
You know where it is, hold on.
You collected them.
No, did I give it to Tab?
What?
The affidavits?
No.
I had a folder that said Susan's affidavits.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Jen's got them.
okay.
All right, so-
It's in safe hands.
I can always fill out another one.
I'm still.
Yours is in interest?
Let's separate. Rich, when,
November
where's,
30th of 2017 is when they put the original application in.
is it? I made a mistake. Rich, where's the findings of fact? that I wrote
For what?
for this thing. I had to write the findings of fact for each time.
I never saw it.
I know, it wasn't the
Do
issue.
this under other business? Are we good with
Yeah.
that?
We are done. The only other thing we have on the
What
agenda
do we have
is land use.
to the chair?
Kim,
We have other people in the, and I'd like to know what, for what?
well, that's a really good question. What can we do for you?
Just us?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Well, we've been following, trying to follow anyways, the street design and construction standards
Oh,
revisions.
wrong
that
committee.
happened. I realize that, but we were just trying to learn more about the land use ordinance revisions and what that included. So we're really just here for a learning opportunity in that, to
Okay.
like
All right, 'cause
ask
I was gonna
questions
say,
or
we appreciate
anything, or,
cause they haven't seen them either. So-
okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna move that we postpone the discussion of the land use
And
ordinance till our next meeting.
fine too.
And I was gonna second that.
There's-
I'm sorry.
Does he have,
Yeah,
yeah, he's got, I mean, do you have something specific?
No, I mean, I was to the, you guys, what, a month and a half, 2 months ago?
Yeah, home
Yeah.
occupation, yeah.
Home occupation, yeah,
Yeah.
and, you know, it's kind of important to me, this is my job, this is my career. So, I need to know which direction I'm heading.
Yep.
You don't remember, do you?
I do remember. I
Okay.
do remember.
No, you look puzzled, that's why.
No, I'm trying to
But
think
you
of.
missed the application date, right? Didn't something happen?
That was
No.
a different thing.
It was a
That was
different
something
thing,
different thing?
Yeah, it was different. No, Josh had asked, for two things. Number one, he had asked, Josh, is you've been participating in the one meeting that we had on putting contractor yard ones into the R1 district.
Yes.
And the second thing Josh asked for, and that you have granted,
Yeah.
but we haven't gotten to because the selectmen haven't called the special meeting yet, is, the planning board's already approved, reopening contractor yard registration.
All right, we can't do anything until the selectmen call for a special meeting,
Right.
so that we can have a public hearing and get everything finalized.
We could have the
Just
public
wait.
hearing, I mean, we can have the public hearing anytime we want to. It's just that,
We could, but it will be easier to wait until the Board of Selectmen call it, because we're gonna have a whole bunch of stuff to do all at once.
Yeah, but we may have more public hearings. If we have a public hearing for this, it's already done.
I think the question was whether or not the planning board was gonna do the public hearings for a road, because, that still has to go to the planning board to hold the public hearing, because that's a requirement by state law. And then we were gonna also piggyback on a number of other things, including the contractor yard, and, the
definition of side yard or
Well-
front, two front yards, we have a number of other things.
Well,
I forget them all, they're all
well,
little stuff.
no, the thing is, for his sake, okay,
But we can't do anything until they call a special town meeting.
but we still can have a public hearing. It's not gonna take long, but it's at least, it's done, and he knows it's done, and everything else.
We could do that, if you wanna do that, it's
So-
up to the board.
So what was do you have material prepared for what the proposed discussion would be on the home occupation for tonight?
Oh, I was gonna discuss a number of things on home occupations tonight. Did I have anything set? No, I was just gonna talk about some things that I discussed with the town.
So I wholeheartedly appreciate Susan and Jens's suggestion.
Okay,
But I think given that we've got some public here that has sort of waited out the process tonight.
But I don't think they're here for, well, Josh is here
They're
for a home
just-
occupation.
yeah.
well, I'd like to make a motion to hold a public hearing for reopening the contractor yard one in zone R1, at least, ASAP.
Is there a second to that motion?
I don't think you
Hearing
can
none,
make
the
it.
motion fails.
I was gonna say also, you can't restrict, all you're doing is just changing one date on the existing ordinance.
So it's done.
August 1st, 2020.
Whenever the selectmen call for that special town meeting, we will be holding that public hearing at that point.
Okay. When will I get notification of that, or how do we?
I know, we can ask a selectman who's sitting in the back of the room, but we don't have a clue.
We're getting pretty close, but
Yeah.
given that the holidays are here, I don't know if we'll get it in before year end, to be quite honest.
You'll work on it though.
What do you have, 2 meetings, 3 meetings left?
We do, and one of them is falling right around Thanksgiving, so I think that one got moved to the first week of December.
And you're not having a meeting on the week of the Christmas then?
Right.
Yeah, we're not either, so,
Right, that's the whole issue.
so it'll be the first of the year.
Is that holding you up, Josh? Your hands are tied as far as?
Yeah, I had to move all my equipment, all my trucks, and, everything's moved.
And Josh is also bringing up another interesting point, is that to remind you guys that a week from today, you're meeting with the comp plan committee to discuss
Discuss R1.
R1, of which contractor yards is one of the things. Y'all forgot about that.
Is that?
No, I was going to remind
Is
them,
that this November 15th?
November 15th, yep,
November 15th.
here in this room.
Oh, joy.
Yep, and that's one of the things that we're gonna discuss. But I will hopefully have something, I think we're gonna have some proposals rather than just shoot the breeze like we did last time. Shooting the breeze is.
Oh, no, you weren't there for the last one.
That
The last one was
official
really
meeting,
shoot
you
the
guys,
breeze.
you guys didn't even post it. I go on vacation, you didn't even post it.
That's true, and that was my
It
fault.
was an illegal
And
meeting.
that's why you may never go on vacation again.
It was not an illegal meeting, nothing
hear
was
that, Jason?
decided.
Change the
We sat around and talked.
policies there?
Change of policy. No town planner or member of the board of selectmen is ever allowed to go on vacation ever again.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, we're together on that one, right?
I knew you would be.
Okay,
So-
so
One
you have to
vacation
wait,
all
I
year, and you
guess,
guys.
unfortunately.
I think there's a couple of things that we should be able to reach consensus on in terms of the various districts. And that, more than anything, that's like residential districts, mixed-use districts, define what mixed use is, cause it's not defined anywhere. Business district, I had a discussion with Sarge Kinder,
20 other people doing
and Tuesday's polls, and now y'all know how much I enjoy having a business in the R1.
like 2 guys that were permitted.
Right?
When this came out, and then there was a deadline in
I don't think
2015.
businesses should be allowed in any residential districts.
But you
If
could,
you have an existing business, then I don't have a problem with that staying, but I don't think you should be adding new ones. You know, by the same token, if you have if you are in the business district, and you are currently a residential, home there, I don't think you should be forced to move, but I don't think we should be putting new ones in the business district. It's the business district. And what's happening right now is that we are having, Mission Creek, for lack of a better term, and more residences are showing up in the business district. And I don't think that that's appropriate. I think we should make sure that they're very clearly defined and very clearly separated. And we can have a mixed-use district where both residences and businesses are allowed. But I think we need to clarify what the various districts are for.
Well, we really need then to clarify what mixed use is all about, because Bill Stilfin's attorney is going on, he's going to do further due diligence based upon the, our admission that it is a mixed use lot, and we don't even know what that means yet.
Yep.
So,
And also too, at the same time, when's the 15th, the meeting? Okay.
Next Thursday.
But turn around, we still could, even if we define it, okay, which way or another, it can't be held against him.
No, that's, we have
I'm
to take
just-
that, but in order to make those, definitive changes, we have to come up with what we want and then go to the town meeting and say, this is what we would like to do.
Yeah, terminology.
Yeah, but it's
The
all something that
definition.
we have to have public hearings and go to town meeting for. I just like to see us, what are we doing in each one of these different districts? When we say that it's an urban residential district, what the dickens do we mean?
well, that we're gonna have to, that's why we talked about looking at other communities and seeing how they define some of their, districts, because we need a jumping off point, because Arundel's gonna change, and unfortunately, time marches on, and we need to
Yep.
have some language in place so that everybody's on the same page. Otherwise, you're gonna have
We're not.
craziness.
And nobody's on the same page.
That's right.
Between us and the comp plan and the public in general, and the board of selectmen, nobody's on the same page.
It's like herding cats.
We need to clarify the definitions so that when we talk about them, everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, I
We need to
totally
quit
agree.
pretending to be millennials and change the definition when we feel like it.
I'm with you.
I have no problem slapping millennials, my daughter is one. At
I
any
don't know
rate,
what age millennial covers.
33?
1980, right? 1980?
No, I thought it was 83.
Oh, was it
It might be
83?
80.
What is
I
it,
thought
before 83?
I thought it was 80.
Or after 83?
Around
There's a young
83,
age
she's-
where they don't want
Yeah.
to.
Is it 80 or 83?
83-ish.
Yeah.
So if you're before 83, you're still an old part?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
Pretty much.
That's the definition.
I guess I
Okay.
fall in
So
that
Todd,
category.
are we good?
Yeah,
What other news?
no news from Bologna, Petruchio.
Huh?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
no, my pen.
I see at least the new signs up.
Which, the cable canine? Yeah, there's.
No.
Which
Yeah, it is.
No, the one about the new business coming in town. They announced it.
Which one?
Sam Hill Tavern, where it was there.
Yeah.
Bagaloo or,
Vandaloo.
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 But I told you about those, that
Yeah.
during the winter.
we
Yeah.
knew it was coming, but they announced it. They have the signs up saying they're coming.
Oh, good.
Oh, good.
That's what I'm speaking of.
So they're moving out of Kennebunkport?
Yes.
They're kind of squished in that corner anyway.
Well, that was part of their issue.
That was
And this location will be perfect for them.
Great.
That's why they bought Yankee Fireplace.
Okay?
Big change for them.
What else is,
That's the other thing we wanna eventually end up looking at is home occupations, and where they're allowed or where they're not allowed, and what
Is a home
constitutes a home
Right.
occupation.
Totally agree.
Because you're gonna have a real revolt from the staff on this.
from the staff?
Yeah, from the
Yep,
staff.
from the staff.
Yeah, we're gonna have a real problem with it, because the problem is that we have no definition of home occupation, we have a real loosey-goosey concept about who can be in home occupation, who can't. And quite frankly, the biggest problem is we have home occupations all over the place, we have no idea, if they're made permitted uses, there's absolutely no way to track them. No way for the assessor to track them, for assessing purposes, there's no way of knowing whether or not they're in conformance with the ordinance, because it's really written like a conditional use. In fact, it's even in the conditional use section. And, quite frankly, in some sections, it's not permitted.
Well,
We
I'm
have
gonna
some
look it up.
residential where
I
it's
am
not
gonna
permitted,
go
and
and
we're
look
doing
up
it
some of
all
the
over the
different
place.
what other towns and places, urban,
We can set our
suburban,
own-
and
we can
otherwise.
decide what we wanna do.
Right, but
I went to
it's
go
sometimes
find and
it's-
ask them for
But
this.
it's, no, not ask, just you can look at,
Right.
you
I
can
know,
look it up.
let's
I
do it.
think we should look at language and see what, and take what we like and leave the rest. I mean,
I would agree.
We
I
don't
would- I
have
would
to
say though, we
reinvent the
first
wheel.
decide what we want to achieve. in a
well,
law
I think
application.
some of the people, some of the other ordinances from other places might give us things that we haven't even thought about in terms of the use, and we can modify accordingly or leave it be. But, you know, maybe having a jumping off point would be,
Right,
yeah.
because, you know, well, the question, we had an issue a month ago. We had somebody who wanted to open a brewery
Right,
That was-
in their house.
or
No,
a distillery.
The
The
brewery.
distillery.
You're right, the
Distillery.
distillery, sorry.
Well,
No,
to me,
not in
to
their
me,
house.
there's no
Yeah.
difference. We had the brewery too, you guys didn't know about it, it was staff level. Because home occupations are staff level reviews. And, yeah, we had a brewery. We had a brewery up in, the one, home brew in, up in, on Maplewood, I believe it was.
Yeah, Clearview Estates.
Yeah, that's where, yeah. but
Well,
we-
well, the other thing too, he wanted to put another building up to accommodate it.
Yeah, so did the distillery.
But
but
that's,
they wanted to buy, put land,
Yeah.
those are the
It morphed,
questions that we
changed
have to
over
answer.
time.
Do we want, is that a home
What's a
occupation?
home
Do we think
occupation?
that that's appropriate?
Well, that's why I
No,
think
no, that was-
next time I will, or I'll email it to everybody. I'll look at a bunch of different places.
Okay.
And we can look at it. And,
And while you're at it, everybody can think about, what do we think is appropriate for a home occupation? And we can put it in there and say, okay, here's this list. And then we can refine it and say, well, I like this, I like that, I don't like this, I don't like that.
right,
And we can cull it down to where we have an acceptable concept. I lived in a town before I moved to Arundel. If I were a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, or a daycare, I could have a home occupation. I was an accountant working by myself, and I could not work out of my house. At some point, legally.
yeah, but
I
I
know, and
mean,
I had a
that's,
fight with the town. I ended up paying $150 fine instead of $35,000.
so I'll do that.
But
And you wrote it off, never heard.
I'll just pull the ordinances off and I'll put them in a Word doc and I'll send them.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that'll
That'd be
that'll be
great.
something to look at,
Thank you.
And then we can do what we want.
okay?
Yep.
Somebody make a motion.
Take a motion, we adjourn.
One
I'm
suggestion,
sorry, I didn't mean to jump.
under other business, I think there are some affidavits that have the wrong dates in them,
Oh, yeah, most of them say November.
and that's not right.
That's what Tad sent out.
Yeah, Tad made a mistake.
Dad made a mistake, wait,
Did
I get that again?
Hard blue.
did we get that on tape?
Ted, can you
It's already, yeah, we've already got.
assess the correct date and
Yes, it's already.
send it out?
July 13, why don't we just
Just
take
do
care
it
of
right
it
now.
now?
Roger,
Can we do that?
Yep,
July
one
13th.
striking and initial.
Jamie,
That's fine.
That's legitimate?
Yeah, that's like.
What's the date?
July 13th, 2017.
So where do you want us to initial?
why July
Where they
thirteenth?
Right
changed
at
it.
the,
Hey,
Yeah.
why July 13th?
That was when the application was originally submitted. by
Yeah, but this
PayStack.
application is saying that you watched all the videos, isn't it?
Oh, no,
So number two,
the very,
dated where we would put November 30th, 2017. We strike that.
And it's July 30th?
July
13th.
13th,
July 13th, okay.
2017.
13/17.
July 13, 2017, and we've got to initial it?
Yeah, yep,
We're, all the
There you go.
hearings.
Great, thanks.
yeah.
No, great.
You and Marty and I were the only ones that made.
Not acceptable,
I think that was easier than watching those films.
Yeah, it's much easier if you did.
Agonizing, isn't
Jens
it?
doesn't want me bothering his staff
I
anymore.
looked at
There you go.
one,
Did
that's,
you
I'm
go
going
for
to
it?
the next meeting.
Yeah, I called up,
I want nothing to do.
Trudy
Did you
or.
notice that the-
I
Trudy or
did, I
Leslie
wanted to
first,
get
she
home
said,
with
You can't have it.
No, it was a,
You can have it when you quit. That's it.
I'm not planning on quitting just yet.
Sabrina. She said she was filling in
No,
that day,
yeah.
but had all her stuff.
She was threatening me with her name.
It's my- one of my favorite times.
Yeah, she was very helpful,
Sleeves have
you
to
know.
be sold.
Yeah, I called her.
You can't quit.
Can I get a motion, please?
gave her
Yeah,
a heads up.
I second
Yeah,
that.
motion's been made,
Bye.
made and seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
We're done.
I move